What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today, I'm going to tell you all about the most unhinged mother-in-law in the world. I've got two posts for you today, but they are about the same woman. And actually, there are loads more posts about this crazy mother-in-law as well. So if you do go on to enjoy these two stories, then this may become another series. We've had Do It for Dan, we've had the most entitled family in the world. There have been loads of other characters that have seen extended stays on my channel. This woman here, Bat Crazy Betty, may be one of them as well. My mother-in-law hates me and says I'm not part of her family. Hello, Reddit. I've been lurking in this subreddit for a week. I thought I was the only one who dealt with trash like this, but after reading some of the posts in here, it makes me feel better to know that I'm not the only one who has experience with the lunacy that is the dreaded mother-in-law. For a little context, I met my husband back in middle school. We were friends for a long time before hooking up in high school and getting married right after we were both 18. We were stuck living at my parents' place for around 2 years until we'd saved enough to start paying on an apartment. It wasn't anything to brag about, but it was something, at least. His mother absolutely hated me right from the jump. I've always been considered some kind of obstacle in the way of her and her son's bond. She never accepted me into her family. I was never invited to birthdays, holidays, or any type of family event for the first 9 years of our marriage. I didn't mind, as being within the same room as her for any length of time gave me the literal poops. I have IBS, so stress and anxiety really screw with my insides. My husband catered to this for a couple of years, until he realised it wasn't fair to me. So he stopped accepting her invites. This didn't go over well at all. At first, it was phone calls and texts demanding my husband accept that the tramp, me, is not welcome, and that he is expected to show up within the next hour or else. It then graduated to pounding on the front door, which went ignored, pushing handwritten notes through our mail slot, leaving notes pinned under the windshield wipers on our car, stuff like that. And they ranged from tame to borderline creepy and psychotic. This woman is unhinged. The stuff she would write sometimes made me wonder if she was crushing on her own freaking kid. She can't love you like I do. I'm the best thing you'll ever have in your life. I miss you, baby. No, before you draw conclusions, she's never tried hooking up with her son. She's just overly involved and lonely. My husband's father died when my husband was a little kid from cancer. It was devastating for both my husband and his mother. She compensated with overly loving him and spoiling him to the point where she was emotionally and socially dependent on him. I remember when we were kids, if my husband wanted to go outside to play with friends, she would fake some kind of illness to get him to stay home. This went on all the way into high school. She wouldn't let him miss school as she believed his education was important, so she at least gets a point for that. But when it came to my husband's social life, she did not like it when he strayed away from the nest, for any reason. When I came into the picture, you would think that someone had died. Her world had fallen apart. Someone had swooped in to take her baby away from her. No, mother-in-law, I'm just here because your son is cute and he drives. At least that was what my thoughts were at the time. I was a shallow kid, don't judge me. It took around 3 years of us dating in high school before it finally hit me how much I loved this man and I was going to spend the rest of my life with him. We almost missed senior prom because his mother tried to sabotage it for us, but thankfully we were able to go and he proposed to me on the dance floor in front of everyone. I said yes. We couldn't really afford a big wedding, so we eloped to Vegas at a small drive-through chapel. When his mother found out, she pooped herself, literally. As she was staring daggers into me, she was straining so hard that the air coming out of her sounded like a drowning foghorn. She excused herself and went to go shower. Oh my goodness. We were hoping that once she cleaned herself up, we could have a rational conversation. Nope. The 9th circle of hell opened, and out came the most frightening demon, crawling on all fours and ready to pierce a hole straight through my skull. Oh no, it was just my mother-in-law, screaming at us, mainly at me for taking her son away. My husband tried to tell her that he loved me, but her screaming was so loud that she drowned him out. After around 10 minutes of the screaming, my husband decided that was all he could stand. He took me by the hand and started pulling me towards the door. She begged him to stay and to see reason that I'm just some tramp that had invaded her home and corrupted him. My husband didn't miss a beat. This isn't verbatim, but he said something along the lines of, "Mum, you're going to have to accept that I am a grown man now and screaming at me won't work anymore. I love this woman. She has been there for me since middle school and I fell in love with her. I married her because I want to be with her and she is the love of my life. If you can't love me enough to accept her, then we just can't talk anymore." And that was that. We left. I have plenty of other stories about this woman, but this was but a taste of things to come. Take care. And as I said in the intro, guys, there is another story to come in this episode. Wow. I mean, what a setup, by the way. That feels like the context that we need to now really dive into the story. Plenty of other stories about this woman, a little taste of things to come. I'm excited. She sounds just absolutely mental. Let's get into the first proper story about this crazy lady. Okay, so let's get into this second story. As I said in the intro, I think this has a good chance of becoming a series, guys. So again, let me know in the comments down below if you go on to enjoy these stories and want to see more. There is a lot more. Here is the second post. My mother-in-law tries to unalive me and sabotage prom. Thank you for your comments on my previous post. I appreciate it. That was mostly just background context, as I want to share even more crazy stories about this woman. I want to keep this in a timeline format, so I'm not bouncing back and forth over the years. I want to give her a nickname so it's easier, so I think I'll call her BB, short for Bat Crazy Betty. You know what, guys? I'll call her Betty, just because I prefer calling people by actual names, but Bat Crazy Betty is a wonderful nickname. The stuff that happened before this story, mainly her screaming at my husband, who I'll call Dan, and me about how horrible I am, well, she hadn't done anything particularly bad up until that point. She did throw things at me and call me horrible names, but I'd let it roll off my shoulders, or I'd go cry into my pillow when I got home. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. What a female dog. Anyway, on to the story. Senior prom. Quick trigger warning as well, this deals with attempted vehicular assault. I almost didn't go because I had a horrible flu that week. Dan was there to the rescue with lots of medicine, soup, love and cuddles. We often did this for each other when one of us was ill. We'd wait until Betty was at work and I'd sneak over and take care of him. I'd cook for him, clean up his house, even do their laundry just because I'm a good girlfriend. I have another story about when I decided to cook dinner for Betty as a peace offering. My parents were always too busy with work, so I was usually left to fend for myself when I reached a certain age. When I was little, we had a nanny. Dan was my savior that week because I woke up the day of prom feeling great. My mother had booked me appointments to get my hair, makeup and nails done. Despite my parents working 98% of the time, they still loved me and wanted pictures of everything. My parents' house is a shrine to my upbringing. Every wall is plastered with pictures of me of varying ages. I'm an only child if you couldn't tell. After I got married, my husband started getting included in the shrine. They are lawyers. Yes, they do get involved eventually in the Betty debacle. Oh my goodness me. I have a feeling there is so much to come here. Anyway, I finished at the hair salon about 2 hours before we had to be at prom. We went to Dan's house so he could get ready. I was sitting in the passenger seat of his car while waiting for him. Betty is there on the porch, glaring at me with her arms crossed like a bouncer. I'm ignoring her while scrolling Facebook on my phone. Dan comes out after an hour, and I look up from my phone and watch them arguing on the porch. She is pointing at me, then at herself. Dan is holding his phone out to her. I roll down the window to catch what is being said. Not verbatim, but close enough. "How can you choose her over me? I'm your mother." "Mum, please, I just want you to take some pictures of us together." "But you don't need pictures of her. I can take you to prom. We can get pictures together. I'll pay to have them professionally done. I'll get dressed while you take that tramp home." "No, you cannot take me to prom. You're my mum, not my girlfriend. She is, and she's not a tramp. Can you please take one frickin' picture?" "How dare you speak to me like that? No, I hate her. She's trying to ruin what we have." "What do you mean, what we have? You're acting crazy." I was flabbergasted. Ruin what they have? Creepy. I got out of the car, hoping to help diffuse the situation. That was a big mistake. "And you," she points at me, "you may have your hooks in him now, but he will see you for what you truly are one day and come crawling back to me because I am his mother and the love of his life, you female dog." I had endured countless insults and humiliation by this woman for the past 2 years at this point. I had enough. I'll admit that this was petty and a little snarky coming from me, but I feel justified. I was 17 at the time too. Sue me. I said, no, you are a psycho who can't stand that your precious little boy is growing up and you can't stop that. I'm taking your son to prom and we're gonna have a good time. Who knows? Maybe he'll get me pregnant tonight and you'll be stuck with me forever. Get over it, lady. I won. Yeah, it felt good to say that. Dan blushed and tried to hide his smile. He and I didn't plan on having kids for a while, but he used to joke about knocking me up so I couldn't leave him throughout high school. Don't worry, they were truly only jokes. Betty was absolutely gobsmacked by what I said. She did not expect me to say anything back to her. She turned and raced inside the house and slammed the door. Dan and I looked at each other and laughed. Good for you for standing up for yourself, babe, my amazing man said. We said we'll get pictures at prom and headed towards the car. Just then, the garage door opened and Betty was sitting in her car. She hit the frickin' gas. Thankfully, we were close enough to Dan's car. She swerved to avoid hitting it and left skid marks on her lawn. This F-nut actually tried to run me over. I could feel the frickin' wind blow past me. That is how close she got. I got very scared and started hyperventilating. The corset on my dress was so tight that in my panic, I thought I was suffocating. Dan went over to confront her and was screaming at her while she got out and went back into the house. While Dan was checking on me to make sure I was okay, Betty comes back out with a large glass of wine and throws it on me. My dress was a beautiful pastel pink with lace and silk. It was fitted to my body perfectly in a mermaid tail fashion. The corset was made with boning and a silk tie. It wasn't cheap. My parents had spent a lot of money for that dress, and now it had a massive dark red stain on it. I got into Dan's car and did my best to hide my tears while they argued on the front lawn. A neighbour had witnessed the whole thing and actually called the police. We talked to them and said we didn't want to press charges. I know, big mistake. We said it was a minor dispute. The police insisted we separate for the night just to calm the situation down anyway. Dan went inside and packed a bag to stay with me for the night. We went to my house so I could get cleaned up. My dress was ruined and there was no way we had time for me to put it through the wash. I said I no longer wanted to go, but Dan said that if we didn't, it would be letting Betty win. He looked at me, then said that the stain looked like it could be part of the dress because of the colours and that maybe nobody would notice. I give him so much credit for trying to be supportive and looking on the bright side. I always call him Mr. Brightside after the song because he has a lovely talent of seeing the good in everything no matter the situation. The man has enough optimism for the both of us. I love him. After a few minutes of fixing my makeup, we went to prom. To my surprise, nobody said anything about my dress. I was worried there might be a strong smell of wine, but thankfully nobody seemed to notice. I had doused myself in perfume before we went, so that must have masked the odour. There was a photographer there, and we got a few pictures together. I asked the photographer to airbrush out the stain. When I got the pictures in the mail later that month, the dress looked perfect. No stain, thank God. He had to airbrush out a lot of the lace, but he did it in a way that made the dress look just as beautiful. I had a great time, and as you all know, Dan proposed to me in the middle of the dance floor. He had saved money from his part-time job and bought me an engagement ring with a heart-shaped ruby and 2 diamonds set in white gold. Wow, I love it. I still wear it to this day, albeit I had to get it resized as I packed on a few pounds over the years. I said yes, of course, and we had a very nice evening. When we went back to my house afterwards, we spent the night passed out on the couch with the TV going. He had about 30 missed calls and several voicemails on his phone, and only angry texts telling him to rot in hell with his father, and another apologising profusely for her saying that. What a peach that woman is. And yes, the prom picture is still on the wall of my parents' house to this day, right next to our wedding picture. On a day when my mother was home, she, my cousin and I dyed the dress black and we had the dry cleaners make a few alterations so my cousin could wear it at her prom later in the month. Now look, she loved my dress, but she is 100% a goth. She was over the moon and she looked beautiful in her dark makeup and slicked back hair. My mother is a rock star. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll be back with another story tomorrow. So there we go, guys. That is an introduction into the world of Bat Crazy Betty. Obviously, I can't call her by her real name for monetization reasons. This video would probably be demonetized if I said what I want to say and what OP has so beautifully and poignantly called her. But yeah, that's the beginning. Let me know. Do you want to see more stories about Bat Crazy Betty, Dan, OP, and who knows, maybe some more characters in the future? Because as I said in the intro, there is a lot more here. This is just the first 2 posts of, from what I can see, about 12 to 15. That's just good content. That is just great stories. I mean, I wasn't expecting her to be as crazy from the off, trying to kill you. I mean, the fact that you didn't press charges there is insane. Who knows how close she actually was to you. Maybe she was just doing it as more of a threat to scare you than actually hit you. But there's a lot more to come. Getting in her car and putting her foot to the floor and driving towards you, that is very dangerous stuff. Bat Crazy Betty hates my cooking. First of all, to answer a few questions from my previous post, I did not wish to press charges on Betty. At the time, I didn't want to put Dan through that, as my parents have told me about many cases where kids are put through hell because of their parents in court. He would have had to testify against his own mother. I didn't think it would be fair or right to make him do that. My parents worked all of the time and I didn't want to stress them out. They might have made me stop seeing Dan, and I wasn't willing to lose him. We told the cops that it was just a minor dispute. Remember, guys, they're in high school, right? They're not adults. They're just teenagers at this point. As for why I'm sharing now, well, I started seeing a lot of Reddit stories posted on YouTube and began listening to them while doing chores around the house. I decided to check out Reddit, and I found this subreddit and began reading a lot of the stories posted here. I figured that some of you lovely folks would enjoy my stories, so why not? As to another question about my dress stinking of wine, nobody said anything about it. I sprayed myself with a lot of perfume, hoping to mask the smell, so I guess it worked? I don't know. As for the stain, again, nobody said anything. No one asked about it after. I was one of the lucky ones that managed to get along with just about everybody. Most of my close friends knew about Betty and how she felt about me. Anyway, I've got another story for all of you lovely people out there today. This was shortly before my 18th birthday. On one of the very rare occasions, as in almost never, Betty allowed me to come over to her and Dan's house for the weekend. She was going on a short trip over the weekend for a business conference and she couldn't get out of it. Dan was stuck studying for finals that week and couldn't do a lot around the house. Neither could I, as I was also studying for finals. So, to help him out, she said I could stay if I helped him study and kept the house clean. And of course, we were not allowed to sleep in the same bed. I don't know how she thought she could enforce that while not in the house, but whatever. One of Betty's only redeeming qualities back then was that she did push for Dan to do well in school. She wanted him to get a good education, go to medical school, and become a doctor. That was her dream. Dan ultimately got to medical school but dropped out and went to trade school instead to get his license in HVAC. That annoyed Betty a lot. Anyway, we did study a lot in the 2 days I stayed over. We also did other things. We didn't make a mess, opting to get takeout so it was easy to keep the place clean. On the day Betty was supposed to come back, I made the dumb choice to surprise her with dinner. We went to the grocery store and I picked up some ingredients to make a dish I thought she might like. My nanny used to make this for my parents every Friday when I was growing up, and it quickly became a favourite. I loved it. It was shrimp Alfredo, in case you were curious. Everyone loves shrimp Alfredo. I even bought a bouquet of flowers from the grocery store to give to her. Now, I'll admit that I wasn't the best cook growing up, but I did know how to make that dish. My nanny showed me how to de-skin and de-vein the shrimp, so I took extra time just to make sure the shrimp was perfect. The only thing I did differently was that I used jarred Alfredo sauce. I had Dan set the table, and he even lit a couple of candles just to make it look nice. Betty called when she was 5 minutes out, and I made a mad dash to plate the food and put it on the table. I started putting the dishes in the dishwasher, and I didn't finish by the time Betty flounced in. She bounded up to Dan and hugged him and said she had missed her baby so much. I rolled my eyes because weird. She then took notice of me and got eerily quiet. I finished with the dishes and started up the wash. I smiled at her and said I wanted to surprise her. I even handed her the bouquet of flowers and said I wanted to give them to her as a thank you for allowing me to stay over the weekend. She snatched the flowers out of my hand, looked at the food, and promptly sneered, "Why?" That was all she had to say. I was a bit shocked by her reaction, but I rolled with it, and I said I wanted us to enjoy a nice dinner together, and I asked her to sit down. She looked at Dan, who was pleading with her to please give it a try. She did begrudgingly, and Dan and I sat down as well. She slammed the flowers down onto the table like a whip and scooped up a huge bite and put it into her mouth. She immediately spat it out onto the plate, making a show of it by spattering and sputtering the Alfredo sauce all over the flowers. She wiped her mouth on the back of her hand and stood up. How disgusting! It tastes like feet! How could you feed me that trash? Did you make this, OP? Yeah, I did. I thought you'd like it. Well, I don't. It's gross. You can go home. You're not needed here anymore. I told Dan to make sure you were gone before I got here. I will admit, I was a little hurt. I spent a long time making that dang dish, and she didn't even appreciate it. She spat her food all over the flowers I'd bought her and treated me like trash when I was just trying to do something nice for her. Dan got annoyed and started yelling at his mum. Why can't you just be nice? She helped me study like you wanted, kept your house clean, and was even nice. Bought you flowers and made you dinner. You could be grateful. Even if you don't like it, you could have been nicer about it. Well, how dare you speak to me like that? I am the mother and you are the child. You do not direct me. I direct you. Go to your room. I will deal with you after I clean up the mess she left on my table. Excuse me? As for you, OP, get out of my house and don't come back. I mean, it's worth remembering, guys, here, that these two are like 17, 18 years old, and she's treating them like 6-year-olds. I left and I drove home in tears. Dan texted me later and told me she threw the whole pot of shrimp Alfredo away and put the flowers into the garbage disposal. When he went for a glass of water, he saw the shredded remnants of the flowers in the sink. That one stung a bit. Anyway, I'll post again soon. Bye. And edit to add, we both passed our finals. Well, that is good news, at least. I mean, look, we already knew from the first 2 posts here that this woman is just absolutely crazy, but it's just so dumb. Why is she acting like this? This is what I don't understand. And this is what I think me and you are going to have to try and understand and work out as we go through these stories. The reason why she is acting in this way. Like taking a bite out of a lovely plate of food and immediately, like not even tasting it, not even trying to enjoy it, immediately spluttering it up. Who does that? That's just so childish. She's obviously doing that for a reason. And then with the flowers, nobody throws away flowers. It's just insane. My guess right now is that I would have to say that she is just very jealous of OP and doesn't like the fact that her little boy is growing up. Apart from that, I can't see any other reason to act like this, but then again, I can't really see any reason to act like this in the first place. Betty goes nuclear on me and my husband when he moves out. I already posted about what happened when my mother-in-law, Betty for short, found out that Dan and I got married. If you don't know what I'm talking about, guys, you gotta go and watch episode 1. We couldn't afford some big elaborate wedding, and we didn't really plan on telling our parents about it anyway, so we eloped to Vegas and got married in a drive-through wedding chapel. We spent our honeymoon in some crummy hotel eating Chinese takeout. We were happy. We loved it. His mother had been blowing up his phone for days, demanding to know where he was. She came up with any excuse she could into guilt-tripping him, hoping he'd come running back to her. What pushed Dan to say it was time to go home was when Betty sent another text saying his father would hate him for how he was treating her. Oh my goodness me. Remember, guys, that Dan's father died when he was a kid. That is unreal. I was fuming, but I let it go and we went home. When we finally got back home, we told my parents first. They weren't happy about it, but they supported us and said that as long as I was happy, they wouldn't give us any trash. They did ask the usual questions one might ask to a couple who gets married so young. Are you pregnant? Where are you going to live? Why now? The usual one would expect. No, I wasn't pregnant. We'd already been looking at apartments and found one we liked and was waiting to hear back about our application. And the why now? Well, why not? We knew we wanted to be together, we loved each other, and I wanted his last name to be my last name. We didn't want to wait. After we told Betty we'd gotten married and she literally pooped herself, she called Dan, begging him to come home so they could discuss things. He was hesitant, but he felt like he owed her an explanation. We drove over to Betty's, and when we tried to go inside, Betty demanded to speak to Dan alone. Dan said if his wife wasn't welcome, then we would leave, so she reluctantly agreed to allow me inside. The 3 of us sat at the table in a dead silence, waiting for one of us to speak up. So good. Dan decided to break that silence and started talking, but she cut him off and demanded to know what I did or said to force him into this situation. I don't remember everything said in the conversation, but most of it consisted of Betty accusing me of somehow forcing Dan into marrying me. Dan, of course, shut it down, but Betty refused to see reason and went on a tirade, screaming at the both of us about how I had destroyed everything. Just tell me, Dan. Tell me what she can give you that I can't. I can give you everything you could ever want. I know we saw that quote earlier, guys, but it is so weird seeing it in its proper context. What is she on about? Dan let out a very frustrated sigh. Well, for one, you can't give me the love, sex, and passion that a woman can give to a man. OP can. You can't make a family with me. OP can. I want children one day, and you can't give me those. I want it all. A house with a picket fence outside, kids in the yard, a family dog. I want that corny stuff. I want to grow old with a woman who will be beside me through my best and my worst. I want what you and Dad had. A happy marriage. Well, what do you mean? I can give you all of those things. Sorry, what? This woman is absolutely crazy. The fly on the wall, me, then said, "Excuse me?" Dan looked like he wanted to throw up. Before that moment, I didn't think her love for Dan went beyond over-involvement and a desperate need to keep him leashed to her bosom, but now it seemed like she was admitting to having a weird sexual attraction to her own son. Oh my gosh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe that is what's actually going on here. "Oh, you know what I mean," she said. "No, Mum, I don't. I think you need help, like serious therapy." "How dare you even say that? I am your mother. Your father would be so disappointed in you for breaking your mother's heart if you were anything like your father." "Oh, that's just it, Mum. I'm not, Dad. I'm your son. You tried to turn me into his replacement since the moment he died. Dad would want me to be happy, not miserably glued to your side." "How can you even say that to me? After all I've done for you, you're willing to throw our relationship away for that?" she said, while pointing at me. She then turned her attention to me and started insulting me, accusing me of everything from R-word to coercion, even kidnapping. I know, just crazy. By this point, Dan had heard enough. There was no resolution and he was fed up. She was determined to cut me down and accuse me of whatever she could to justify how she was speaking to us. She then went back to pleading with Dan, saying she could give him everything he wants if he gets rid of me and comes back to her. She just sounds like a really desperate mental ex to me. Let me know in the comments if you're thinking the same, but this is not mother behavior. This is weird ex sort of stuff. "Okay, look, I think we're done here," Dan said. "It's obvious you're not willing to be grown about this. I'm tired of you constantly insulting OP. She is my wife, and you will not disrespect her like this anymore. I'm moving out. I'll be by this weekend with a truck to get my stuff. Let's go, OP." Betty snapped. She practically told Dan that he was no longer welcome in her life. He'd ruined her life and all of her plans for their future, and he threw it all away for some tramp. Dan and I got into the car and left. Dan moved into my parents' house with me. He didn't talk to Betty for the 2 years we were living there. 2 years of blissful silence. I miss it. Until next time, lovelies. And there we go, guys. Goodness me. I don't even know what to say. If this is really sexual attraction, then that is absolutely insane. Like, it's one thing being really controlling and protective over your kid. It's another trying to replace your dead husband with your son. Bat Crazy Betty comes a-calling after 2 years of blissful silence, and I'm not happy about it. What's up, lovelies? In my last post, I told you all that Dan and I didn't speak to Betty for 2 years after we left her house following our wedding. We were still living in my parents' house, mostly to save up as much money as we could, but we'd just found a rental property on the far end of town and we'd signed the lease. It was a bit outdated than what we were looking for, but it was within our budget and within the city limits, so we went for it. As Dan and I were packing, he gets a call on his phone. It's Betty. I, of course, didn't want him to answer it, but he did anyway. Dang it. He at least put it on speaker while he was still unpacking. Hi, Mum. Long time. Yes, it has been. I was just calling to see how you were doing. I'm fine, just living life as usual, you know? Of course. I'm so glad to hear your voice, Dan. I miss you so much. Dan just sighed. I miss you too, Mum. How is everything? Well, you know, life is life. Are you and what's her name still together? What's her name? Seriously? I wanted to say something, but Dan waved a hand and stopped me. Yes, we are. We're moving into a place together soon. Betty got quiet. Oh, well, that's good, I guess. Listen, I could really use some help if you don't mind. I said quietly. Here we go. Dan just shook his head and shushed me. Rude. What is it? Well, I just got a new computer for work and I need help setting it up. Do you think you could swing by and help me out for an hour or two? I gave Dan a look, like, seriously? We'd planned to have the moving van loaded up by 5 so we could have dinner with my parents at 6 at a restaurant in town. Him going to his mum's would have put a dent into those plans. And this is his mother we're talking about. I wasn't keen on him and her speaking just yet, so I was silently pleading with Dan to say no, shaking my head and mouthing no to him. He was staring at me, looking worried. I mean, if it won't take more than 2 hours, I guess I can help. F! I stood up and walked out of the room in a huff. Dan got his shoes on and grabbed his keys. He was apologizing to me as he was walking out, and he promised to be back in 2 hours. Dear reader, do you think Dan came back in 2 hours? If you said no, you'd be right. I ended up going to the restaurant alone to meet my parents. To avoid getting them upset, I told them that Dan got called into work. I sat mostly in silence as my parents talked about their recent cases, but I would answer questions if asked. I would casually change the subject if they brought up Dan, trying to avoid the topic as it got me upset. I kept looking over at the empty chair beside me, getting angrier and more upset by the minutes. My parents told me they had a gift for me and Dan. They handed me a check for $2,500 and a box covered in wrapping paper. I opened it and it was a ruby crystal pendulum. Oh, that's sick. A little backstory for me and my family, but in each generation, when the daughters have moved out into their own home, the mother gifts them with a crystal pendulum of their birthstone to hang over the bedroom door. That's awesome. My great-great-grandmother had started this, and it's a tradition I plan to keep if I have a daughter of my own. I, of course, forced a smile and thanked my wonderful parents for such thoughtful gifts. By the time dinner was over, I just wanted to cry. I drove back to my parents' house to find Dan waiting for me in the bedroom. He looked frustrated and upset. I asked him what happened. It was like no time had passed at all. Betty was still just as crazy as she was 2 years ago. The moment he arrived, she came barreling out of the door and clung to him like a parasite. She refused to let go as he tried prying her hands off him. When he asked about the computer, she said she'd made up the whole thing just to get him to come over. Because, of course she did. Well, if she made it all up, why didn't you come straight back? I asked. I could tell by the look on his face that he was thinking about lying, likely to avoid annoying me, but it was already too late for that. I gave him a stern look and I told him not to BS me. He sighed and admitted the truth. He went into how Betty started acting like a cat in heat, comparing him to his father and blatantly flirting with him, even trying to get him to cuddle in her bed with her. This story gets weirder and weirder. She also started comparing herself to me. Things like she is a better cook and that I must not be feeding him well enough because he's too skinny and looks sickly. She asked if my breasts were nice and asked him if hers looked nice in her new shirt she had got just to wear for him. What is happening here? She berated him for having tattoos and piercings, saying I must have convinced him to ruin his perfect skin. She started asking questions about our sex life, wondering if his needs were being met. She said she had left his bedroom exactly as he had it and that if he came back home, he could be her baby boy again. That is the most disgusting paragraph I've ever read. I felt sick to my stomach and told him to stop talking, that I'd heard enough. The second she started acting like that, he should have left and cut contact again. He agreed and apologized, but I was too annoyed to accept that. I laid into him. He missed dinner with my parents to go and cater to that psycho. It wasn't fair that he left me to deal with packing alone, and we're stuck with paying for an additional day now, which is eating into our budget. He got angry and told me to take my head out of my butt, that not everything has to be on my terms, and that if he wants to talk to his mother, he will, and he doesn't need my permission. He stormed out and I didn't see him until the next morning. That was the first time we really fought like that. Wow. He came with flowers and an apology. We talked about it. He said he didn't appreciate his mother's behavior, but he felt he'd abandoned her for 2 years, and without him, she'd gotten worse. He said he hoped with some time she might agree to get therapy. I was naturally skeptical. I explained my concerns and he agreed with me, but asked me to be patient with him while he tries to work things out with her. And he asked me to try forming a relationship with her too. I was hesitant, but because I love him and I want our marriage to work, I compromised. I said I would try, but my interactions with her would be extremely limited, as in to holidays and occasional phone calls or visits. He agreed. We both then agreed that if she started with the weird behaviour, he would leave immediately and put her on a timeout. This is roughly where the cycle of week-long timeouts and her insincere apologies started. Score for me because Betty refused to let me come to any holidays or birthdays on her side of the family once she came back into our lives. Holidays are for family, she'd say. As if I hadn't been married to her son for 2 years by this point, but whatever. I didn't care as I preferred quiet holidays over grand spectacles anyway. Dan wasn't happy, but I told him it was fine. I could just celebrate with my parents. I have IBS, so stress and anxiety give me horrible stomach pains, and I'm literally summoning demons for hours, promising to sell my soul to the devil to end my suffering. Dan has recorded these sessions and replayed them for me a few times. It's quite comical. Being around Betty for any length of time causes my stress to go through the roof, and I'm having to rush to the bathroom. Things seemed to calm down for a while until Christmas that year. My parents had rented a cabin in Colorado and invited Dan and I to join them. When Dan told Betty, she insisted we include her too. We were hesitant, but my parents, being good people, extended an invitation. I'll write about what happened in my next post. Until next time, lovelies. Now guys, I really don't want to leave you on a cliffhanger, but that next story that OP's referenced here about their trip to Colorado is absolutely insane. Goodness me, it's an absolute doozy. Now, as for the story that I have just read, I do have some comments about that. Namely, that was the worst paragraph I've ever read in my life. And it actually, OP is making me look silly when I said that maybe Betty was just jealous of Dan leaving home and growing up. Yeah, she is a little bit like that, but there's a lot more to it than that, clearly. I mean, this stuff about her husband dying early is extremely sad, but then trying to, have what you had with your husband with your son is crazy. It's just disgusting. Asking, do her breasts look nice? Imagine you as a mum comparing your son's wife's breast to yours. Does it get much worse than that? I'm just not sure it does. Christmas with Bat Crazy Betty in Colorado, and it was a trash show. Hey lovelies, I'm back with another Bat Crazy Betty story. I just wanted to thank everyone for all your comments, concerns, opinions, and advice on my posts. It's been illuminating. I've realized that I failed to see a lot of red flags in my husband. What I thought was a perfect, happy marriage has cracks on the surface that go deeper than I realized. The biggest problem in our marriage is, of course, still Betty, my husband's crazy mother. I spent some time at work yesterday looking at online therapy services, but I'm going to try discussing it with Dan before committing to it. I don't want to blindside him with it and make him think that I believe he's not capable of making decisions. He's a good man and a great husband. He just has issues cutting the cord, so to speak. Betty is incredibly good at manipulation and has Dan believing that if he doesn't cater to her, he's abandoning her, using his father and sister as ammunition against him, saying they abandoned her and she needs him. His sister was stillborn. Oh my god, we didn't even know that yet. Wow. His sister was stillborn and his father, as we know, died from cancer. Oh my god, what? This woman gets worse and worse with every post. Betty is not alone, by the way, at all. She has family and close friends that she regularly sees. She just doesn't want to acknowledge that Dan is a man, and her obsession with him is creepy and inappropriate. Anyways, onto the story. This might get long, as it was a series of unfortunate events that led up to a massive blowout. My parents loved Christmas, but never liked to do big celebrations. Most of our extended family live far away in different states, and they have busy lives, so it's not always easy to gather everyone together. If we did do a big celebration, we'd have to travel to visit with my grandparents. They're long gone now, but back then we'd go every few years. In the second year of my marriage, my parents decided they wanted to do something different. Colorado is practically in the middle of everyone. So, my parents rented a cabin and invited some of our relatives to come and celebrate the holidays. The cabin had 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms with plenty of space for a huge family. I was excited to have a little vacation with my husband. When Betty found out, she demanded to be included as well. My parents are good people, so they invited her. Much to my displeasure, as I already knew it was going to be bad if she came, but with some assurances from Dan, I let it go. On the morning of our flight, we ended up getting to the airport late because Dan had to go and help Betty with her bags because her car had miraculously broken down the morning of. It didn't, really. She just wanted to get Dan alone so she could lay down some rules about the trip. Her rules, you ask? They were ridiculous. She expected Dan to sleep in the same room and in the same bed as her. She demanded he show her around town and buy her whatever souvenir she wanted. He would have to sit next to her at Christmas dinner, and I would have to sit with my parents on the opposite side of the table. She wanted to open her gifts first before everyone else. Oh wow. And finally, I would have to stay away from them the entire trip and let them have their fun. Absolute idiocy. My husband told me he gave her the typical response to avoid an argument. Yeah, sure mum, whatever you want. When Dan came to get me, I had to sit in the back seat with all of Betty's bags because she just had to sit in the front seat next to Dan. I had to spend a miserable car ride listening to Betty complaining about her job and watching her reaching over to caress the back of Dan's head and play with his hair. He kept jerking his head away, but she kept doing it. She'd occasionally look back at me and smirk while she did it. The last time she did it, I snapped. "Stop touching my husband, you freaking creep." It was like a light switch. She immediately burst into tears, burying her face into her hands and wailing about how I was a horrible daughter-in-law for not letting her show her baby boy affection. Dan told us both to calm down, and we had to endure Betty's hysterics for the rest of the ride. When we got to the airport, she instantly stopped her theatrics and got out like nothing had happened. She smiled at Dan and told him to help her with her bags. She hadn't even been crying. Her eyes were drier than a desert. I don't think I'd gotten whiplash quite that bad from someone's sudden mood shift before. Dan helped Betty with her bags, and I had to carry my own. When we went inside, we were stuck standing in line, and Betty was latching onto my husband's arm while waving and grinning at strangers. Dan was looking uncomfortable. I was annoyed. I kept looking around for my parents, but assumed they'd already gone to the terminal. It took us an hour just to get to the terminal as the airport was busy thanks to the holidays. By the time we got our boarding passes, put our luggage on the carousel, had gone through security and made it to the terminal, I was ready to drop. My feet hurt and I was exhausted from waking up early. I planned to pop a sleeping pill and sleep the entire flight. When it was time to board, Betty realized that her seat wasn't next to Dan's. She demanded I give up my seat and I said no. We argued in the line and Dan snapped and told her to shut up. She started whining and putting on the hysterics again. Dan and I were embarrassed as she was gathering an audience. People were staring, pointing and whispering. Dan asked me if I could please give up my seat just to make her stop. I said heck no, because giving her what she wants will just reinforce the behaviour and I wasn't going to just let her steamroll over me. He got angry and turned his back on me. When we got on the flight, Betty was still crying and demanding I give up my seat. She was making a scene, refusing to go to her seat and blocking the aisle. I was sitting in my seat, just trying to ignore her. Dan was trying to calm her down, but the more he tried, the louder and more absurd she got. A flight attendant had to struggle to get through the aisle, through the crowd of passengers, trying to get through, asking what the problem was, and then Betty went into how I was being mean and not letting her sit next to her baby boy. The flight attendant told her she needed to go to her seat or she would call the pilot and security to escort her off the plane. I asked the flight attendant to do that anyway, and Betty glared at me. Realizing she wasn't getting her way, she finally went to her seat, shoving past the poor flight attendant on her way. I was looking out the window and crying because the situation was ridiculous and it had put me in a horrible mood. Dan tried to apologize, but I wasn't interested in talking to him. We spent the flight in silence, but I could occasionally hear Betty berating the flight attendants for their poor service. When we got to Colorado, I rode in the same car as my parents, while Dan and Betty rode in the other. My parents were asking about the situation on the plane, and all I told them was that Betty was afraid of flying and was having an episode. They pressed me for more information, but I didn't explain. I just wanted to get to the cabin and take a nap. I was tired, hungry and cranky. When we got to the cabin, I noticed some of my relatives were already there waiting for us. We exchanged hugs and greetings and went inside. I carried my bags to one of the rooms upstairs and laid down on the bed. Dan dragged his bags into the room and shut the door. We could hear Betty shouting for Dan, and he groaned. My father opened the door and told Dan to get a handle on his mother or he'd be sending her back to the airport in a taxi. Dan left the room and took Betty outside onto the porch. I cracked the window and listened in to see how the situation played out. Dan told her to stop with the behaviour and overdramatics or he'd have to send her home. She tried to argue, but he told her to shut up and to listen to him. As if he hadn't just been telling her off for her behaviour, she started demanding he move his bags into her bedroom so they could sleep together. He said no, and that he was going to spend the trip with his wife too, and not just her. She started crying, blaming me, and said I'd already ruined her Christmas for not letting her sit next to Dan on the fricking plane. He said enough, and threatened to call a taxi to come get her. She calmed down and sat down on the bench outside to pout. Dan came back inside, apologised to my parents and the rest of the family for the trip getting off to a bad start, then came upstairs to our room and closed the door. We got into bed and cuddled to take a nap. Goodness me. I mean, we're just a few hours in to the holiday year, and it's already absolute hell. Surely, like, everyone's just saying, you know what? I know it's your mum, Dan, but she's got to go. By 5 p.m, everybody was in the living room watching TV except Betty. She had barricaded herself in her room and refused to come out. Is she 3 years old is the question I keep asking myself. Dan tried getting her to come out as we were planning to go out for dinner, but she wouldn't answer. I said just let her stew, and we got ready to go. We went to a nice restaurant and actually enjoyed a nice, quiet dinner. We brought her something, of course. We're not monsters. How I wish we hadn't, though. When we got back to the cabin, we found my stuff outside of our bedroom and the strong smell of my perfume. Betty had taken my stuff out and moved hers in. She threw my things over the fricking banister and it landed in the living room below. My Versace perfume that Dan had bought me as a Valentine's Day gift had gotten broken and spilled broken glass and perfume all over my stuff. My suede heels that cost over $300 were ruined. My favourite dress made of silk that was $100 was destroyed. We got into a heated argument and she said that Dan promised they could sleep together. Dan said he only told her that to avoid an argument so he didn't miss the flight. I told her I wasn't going to stand by and let her incestuous obsession with her son ruin my Christmas and marriage, and if she didn't stop with the BS, then she was going to be sent home in a van driven by men wearing white scrubs. I told her she owed me $400 to replace my dress and shoes because they were expensive, and I rarely treated myself to luxury things. Dan then said she also owed $150 for the perfume because she broke it when she threw my stuff. Betty started crying and wailing that I was the problem and that her Christmas was already ruined and she never approved of my marriage to her son in the first place, that I was just a female dog that only wanted his money. What freaking money? I work as a waitress, I still do, and Dan worked at a car dealership at the time. We made enough to pay our bills and Dan was working his way through medical school because it was what she had wanted him to do. I made more money than Dan did because the restaurant that I work at is very popular and I make a lot of money on tips, including my weekly check. When you break it down, for every dollar he made, I made 5. Throughout this whole argument, my parents and my family were witnessing the whole thing. My father's booming voice shouted over Betty's, telling her not to call his daughter a female dog and to stop disrespecting his family and that she was leaving. He had seen enough of her behaviour to see that she is not stable and that she is a serious problem. He told her to pack her stuff and get out. Betty started crying even more, begging to be allowed to stay, that she was sorry. She was just trying to be closer to her son because she spent 2 years without him and she missed him. Now, one thing about my dad is that he is a big softie at heart. He melts when he sees a woman cry, especially my mum. He warned Betty that if she did anything else to ruin the trip, then she was gone. She agreed, gave me a check to replace what was destroyed, and Dan moved her things back into her room. She tried to test the waters and asked Dan to stay with her, but he said no and shut her door and came back to our room. We could hear her crying well into the night, but I was over it and wanted to go to sleep. Dan tried to initiate sex, but I wasn't in the mood and I just went to sleep. Christmas Eve was relatively uneventful. Betty actually made an effort to behave herself and seemed to be enjoying everyone's company. We played games, went skiing, and enjoyed lunch and dinner in town. We drove around to see all the Christmas lights on the homes, then went back to the cabin to watch Christmas movies, listen to music. Dan gave me one of my gifts early, and it was a beautiful diamond bracelet. I thought that Betty had finally cooled down and wasn't going to ruin Christmas for us. Boy, was I freaking wrong. She was just biding her time, thinking that everyone had gotten over her little show the day before. When Dan and I got into bed, he initiated again, and this time I was happy to. I won't get into the details, of course, but we had a good time, snuggled in, and went to sleep. Well, that's a shame. I was after the real gore there. Oh well, let's carry on. I got woken up when I felt a movement in the bed and a happy groan from my husband. Oh my goodness. It was then I heard Betty's voice ring out in the darkness. I love you, Dan. What? I quickly turned on the light and saw Dan snuggled up to his mum. I yelled and he opened his eyes and jerked away from her, and we got out of bed. She was wearing one of my frickin' t-shirts that she must have stolen from my bags. We demanded to know what she was doing, and she said she was making Dan keep his promise. I wish we'd locked the frickin' door. Oh my. I know I said in the last episode that I'd read one of the most crazy paragraphs of all time. Again, it's been usurped. What is happening? Dan grabbed his mum by the arm and took her out the door. He said he was not sleeping with her and to stop with the nonsense and go to bed. He shut the door in her face and locked it. She knocked on it for a few minutes, pitifully begging Dan to come to the door, but then left. I was freaking done. I told Dan that it was time to go no contact with her again. He agreed, but he said he'd let her have Christmas. I wanted her gone that very night, but I wasn't in the mood to argue. I went to sleep mad, and I was still mad when I woke up. The next day, when it was time to open presents, she pouted that she didn't get to open hers first. I made it a point to make her open hers last after everyone else, because I was in the mood to be petty. Dan bought me a matching necklace and earrings, and a dress I've been looking at for a long time. He bought her a pair of earrings, a gift card, and a new coffee maker that she wanted. My mum and aunt spent all day in the kitchen preparing Christmas dinner for everyone. The whole time I could hear Betty criticising their cooking and saying how she could do it better. My awesome aunt, being the petty queen herself, handed Betty the mixing spoon she'd been using and told her to have at it and that she was free to finish making dinner for everyone, so my mother and her could enjoy sitting on the patio, sipping hot cocoa with the biggest poop-eating grin on her face. I smirked. Betty stammered, then set down the spoon and said, "No thanks," and went to go sit on the couch. She started flirting with one of my uncles then, and he told her to shut up because she was disrupting his show. Betty tried to get Dan to come and sit with her, but he and I were busy playing poker with some of my relatives. By the way, this sounds like a phenomenal Christmas. Like skiing, going around looking at the Christmas lights, just having a great time, playing poker, your whole family being there. If it wasn't for this one woman, it would be unreal. Anyway, Betty sat there pouting the whole time, sitting with her arms folded and her lip poking out like a toddler. When dinner was ready, we all went to the table. When Dan came to sit down beside me, Betty grabbed him by the arm and tried to make him sit next to her. My dad gave her a stern look and she quickly let go. Dan sat down beside me and my parents. Betty did ask my other aunt if they could switch seats so that she could at least sit across from Dan. My sweet aunt wasn't confrontational, so she agreed without argument. Betty sat across from Dan while my parents plated everyone's food and passed them out. My dad's voice rang out over the chatter and told us all to bow our heads for grace. As Dad was saying the prayer, I felt Dan jerk. I looked up and he was mouthing something to his mum. I looked at her and she was smiling at him. I looked at Dan and he shook his head at me and we resumed listening to Dad's prayer. It was then that Dan jerked again. This time I looked at Betty and mouthed for her to stop what she was doing. My mother caught my eye and I noticed the irritated look on her face. When Dad finished the prayer, he said Amen in a tone that showed that he was annoyed too. While we were eating, we were all having mild conversation, asking about each other's lives. There was tension in the air, but we were trying to ignore it, as Dad was staring daggers at Betty, who was staring at Dan. Every time Betty talked, she would brag about Dan and compare him to everyone around the table. "Oh, your son's going to college? My son's in medical school. He's going to be a doctor. You work in sales? My son is a car salesman and makes great money to support his wife, who doesn't work." Stuff like that. He doesn't support me, by the way, and I do frickin' work. I'm pretty sure I've worked at the same place for the last year, Betty. I'm a waitress, remember? I said casually. "Oh, well, that's not really a job. That's like prostitution. You get paid for serving people." She actually said that, and my dad slammed his fork down onto the table, becoming angrier with everything coming out of her mouth. Dan told her that my job is a real job and to just eat her dinner quietly. She pouted and piped down. I noticed she was looking around to see if anyone was watching her. She purposefully dropped some of her food onto the floor and excused herself to get it. She crawled under the table and was hidden under the tablecloth. Dan and I looked at one another and I shook my head. I was reaching my limit with this woman's antics. It was then that Dan jerked again and raised up his hands and cried out while looking down at the table, "Mum, what the frick are you doing?" "Sorry, I couldn't resist," she giggled like a lovesick schoolgirl. I pulled up the tablecloth to see Betty laying her head in Dan's lap with a wide grin on her face. My father had finally had enough and stood up from the table. I half expected him to start yelling, but he kept his composure. "Dan, I'm going to ask that you escort your mother to her room and help her pack her things. I'm going to call her a cab." Betty heard this and quickly crawled out from under the table and begged my father not to make her leave. My father snapped. "Shut your frickin' mouth, woman. My wife and I have had to endure 3 days of this. Your behavior is inappropriate and unacceptable. You treat my daughter with constant disrespect and you make us uncomfortable with your behavior towards your son. This is the final straw. You are leaving and returning home. You are no longer welcome here." Guys, my father never cusses. He only does when he's really angry. Betty looked at Dan. "Are you gonna let him talk to me like that?" "Well, what do you want me to do, Mum? He's right. I think you need to do some serious soul searching because how you've acted this whole trip has been insane. Please go home. I will call you when I'm ready. Go, husband, go." "Excuse me?" she said. My awesome aunt replied, "You're excused. Now go and pack your stuff and get the heck out." Betty looked at everyone like she'd just been slapped. She then looked directly at me. I didn't say anything, but I knew she was blaming me for all of this. She then grabbed a handful of food and threw it directly at me. I was hit in the face with mashed potatoes, green beans, and gravy, and I had figgy pudding thrown onto my chest. Dan grabbed Betty around the waist and started dragging her towards her room. My dad had to grab me because I tried to throw myself at her to fight her. Dan stood over his mum, making her pack her things while yelling at her about how unacceptable her behavior had been. My father called the cab and stood guard at the door as she got in and was whisked away to the airport. I sat there crying as my mother and aunts gathered around me to comfort me. My father asked me if I wanted to get a restraining order, and I said I did. Dan, though, begged me not to, and my parents laid him out for it. Dan and I got into a heated argument that night, and I made him sleep in the room his mother had occupied for the rest of the trip. Wow. So Betty finally got her wish. I went to stay at my parents' house for a week when we got home because I couldn't even look at him without being angry. He begged me to come home, and I told him the only way I would is if he goes no contact with his mum. He agreed and sent her a strongly worded message. "Mum, your behavior at Christmas was unacceptable. You disrespected my wife and her family and disrespected my boundaries after I'd laid them out clearly to you. You need help, but I cannot be the one to give it to you. For the foreseeable future, I will not be speaking to you until you make an effort to get therapy and make some serious changes. I love you, but I've had enough." She never responded. After a week, she came crawling back begging for forgiveness and said she was going to look into getting therapy. She never made a promise to get it, but my husband ate it all up and forgave her. She never got that therapy. Dan accepted it. I was fuming, but decided I didn't have the motivation to keep arguing about it, as I was afraid I would lose him if I did. She never demanded to come on any holidays with my family after that, and refused to allow me to come to any, or birthdays, until a couple of years ago. Again, I didn't care. My husband and I worked things out and carried on like nothing had happened, rug sweeping the whole situation. I thought it was fine, but guys, you've helped me to see that sweeping things like this under the rug doesn't work, and I have years of built up resentment for Dan and his mum. Just thinking about all this again has made me angry, and I think I'll stop writing for now. Until next time, I'll remember to keep watch over the clock to make sure I post on time. Okay, there we go. Wow. If you thought things couldn't get any worse, you were wrong. So wrong. What have I just read once again? As I said halfway through that, it genuinely sounds like my ideal Christmas. Apart from the fact that my mum's trying to shag me, obviously. It sounded brilliant. But then it just got ruined by this horrible, horrible individual. Skiing, having some drinks with the family, playing poker, chilling out. That's unreal. Sleeping in your mum's bed. Sign me up. Apart from that, brilliant scenes. Goodness me, your mum has some serious issues. I think the interesting thing to think about here is OP is posting all of these like sort of back to back almost every day at the moment. This stuff is, as OP said at the start, she wants to post in chronological order, and writing this stuff out is sort of making her relive these events in a way, I suppose. And yeah, now she's seeing the red flags, which is interesting, which makes me think, you know, what is going on now? How is their relationship now? But yeah, throughout all of this, you got to remember these things have already happened. So I'm trying to just work out as I go what the situation might be like now. I think it probably goes downhill quite a lot. But anyway, as for that story, look, I don't even need to say anything. I think the story told itself. Absolutely insane. My mother-in-law thinks Valentine's Day is for her, and she broke into my house. In February of 2017, my husband and I were talking about spending a week in Vegas for Valentine's Day. We still weren't 21 yet, so we couldn't go to the casinos, but we loved the vibe, and there was still plenty for the not so legal age people to do. We decided to fly out Friday evening and come back Sunday morning. Thursday, I was in the middle of packing my bag when there was a loud banging on the door. My husband was at work that day and not due back for another 3 hours. I'd just gotten home from my morning shift and I wanted to get my bag packed, so I didn't worry about it later. I went to the door and I checked the peephole. It was Bat Crazy Betty. I really didn't want to deal with her, as I was still annoyed about what happened at Christmas. I tried to pretend I wasn't home, but the banging and her shouting only continued, so I threw open the door. Now, this is not verbatim, but this is just the gist of the conversation. Hello, Betty. I'm a little busy right now. Dan's at work. What do you need?
Where is he? I know you're keeping him in there.
What are you talking about? He's at work right now. If you want to talk to him, you'll have to come back when he's home. I'm busy right now.
What are you doing?
Well, I'm packing.
For what?
Dan and I are going to Vegas for the weekend. I'm just packing my bag today and we're flying out tomorrow.
What do you mean? Dan said he was spending the weekend with me.
I doubt that. Betty has a talent. She can lie without thinking about it. And what makes this talent even better is she actually believes it herself.
Well, ask him. You'll see. Now, where is he? I know you're keeping him in there.
Betty, I'm not keeping your son hostage in my house. We're married. I've already told you, he's at work. She tried to push past me, but I held my stance, blocking her from getting inside. This set her off, and she began screeching at me that she was going to call the cops because I was assaulting her. I told her to go ahead and that she wasn't welcome in my house. She stepped off the porch and took out her phone. I took that opportunity to close the door and I deadbolted it. Haha, female dog. I went into the kitchen and I could hear her screaming into the phone at whoever was unfortunate enough to answer it. Whoever it was, they deserved a raise for dealing with that woman. After a few minutes, she was back at my door, pounding on it. I guess the police told her she couldn't use them to break into someone else's house. They never showed up, by the way. I called Dan at work and told him his crazy mother is at our door, banging on it like a psycho. He sighed and hung up without saying anything. I then heard her phone ringing and she answered it. The switch was instantaneous. She went from screaming banshee to purring kitten in a matter of seconds. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the progression of her mood going from joyful to sad was comical. She looked like she'd just gotten her feelings put into a chokehold. She ran off the porch, got into her car and sped out of there. I thought that was the end of it, but it didn't end there. Dan was annoyed when he got home. I asked him what was wrong and he blew up at me. He told me that when he called her, she said that I tried to invite her to Vegas with them and that I wanted them to enjoy Valentine's Day together without me. He said that I'd ruined the Valentine's Day surprise he'd been planning by inviting her. No, I didn't. I told him that wasn't true and that she made all of that up. I told him what she said about him agreeing to spend the weekend with her instead of me, her belief that I'm essentially holding him hostage in our house, like I keep him chained up in the basement or something, and the threat of calling the cops because I stopped her from breaking into our house. He got even more annoyed and called her. When confronted, she started wailing. I could hear her through the phone, she was that loud. Dan tried to tell her off, but her wailing only got louder. He hung up and apologized to me. We spent the evening ignoring her calls. We went to Vegas the next day and enjoyed the weekend. When we got back, we noticed the front door was open. In a panic, my husband ran in to check on his computer. He's an avid gamer and he shelled out big bucks for his system. He had a PS3, an Xbox 360, even old vintage systems like the Super Nintendo and a Sega. He's quite the collector, and he's expanded it since then. Thankfully, we lived in a decent neighborhood and nothing was taken, of his anyway. We called the police and they walked us around the house, checking on everything to see what was taken. Upon checking in our bedroom, my pendulum was missing. My drawers had been rifled through. My side of the closet, most of my clothes were thrown on the floor. In my side table drawer, I'm keeping this PG, my rocket was missing. Okay. I knew only one person could be responsible, so I told them it had to have been Betty. They said, unless there was proof, they couldn't do much. I could only imagine what Betty would want with a used rocket. I gagged to think of the possibilities. That is disgusting. Dan called her. She flat out denied it, and she was never arrested for it. She did go on a timeout because of it, but of course, Dan let her off the hook by suggesting it could have been someone else. I confronted him with the fact that only my stuff had been taken, not his. He did agree it seemed suspicious, but he didn't want to believe his mother would do such a thing. Days later, when Dan was visiting her, she started asking him questions about our sex life, questions a parent should not be asking their children about. He got uncomfortable and asked to change the subject. She let it go after that. Yeah. Anyways, until next time, lovelies. Now, I've got to be honest, guys. It's getting to the stage now where I can't quite understand what Dan's doing. What is actually happening here? Surely it's got to the stage where you're not believing your mum anymore and you're believing your wife. But how is he still getting angry at OP when his mum is just obviously feeding him complete and utter bull, and that is the most obvious thing ever. She's been doing it for years now, yet he's still believing her. I do agree, as I said in the intro, with the comment that said that he has been being abused by his mum, probably for his life, right? And that he's not solely to blame. But come on, at some point, this guy's got to understand. He's got to realise what is going on and not just believe every single word his mum says, getting annoyed at his wife, and then forcing you, OP, to have to explain everything when it's so blatantly obvious anyway. When's that going to happen? I don't know. Hopefully soon. Okay, now moving on to the second story of this one. Hey lovelies, I'm back quicker than I thought. I was thinking back on all of the situations with Betty, and there are two here that I'd like to share. The first happened soon after the incident in my last post, and the other a few months later. March 2017. Dan told me about this as I wasn't home at the time, I was at work. A few weeks after the whole Valentine's Day incident, Dan was at home and Betty showed up again. She was pounding on the door, screaming at it, demanding to be let in. Dan went to answer, and she barged in and demanded to know where he was being kept. Mum, what are you talking about? Tell Mummy, Dan. Where does she keep you? I know she's keeping you in here and you can't leave. Do you need help escaping from that witch? Mum, you're not making any sense. Well, you're not answering your phone, and when I tried calling her, she didn't answer. She's at work. She took an extra shift. I didn't know you called. My phone's on charge in the bedroom. Is she abusing you, baby? I can help you if you let me. No. So why won't she let you see me? She doesn't let me do anything. She doesn't control me, and she's not abusive. Dan told me he'd had enough by this point, asked her to leave, and sat back down on the couch to resume playing COD. What happened next had me physically gagging as he was telling about it. She bounded over to him like a prancing deer and sat in his lap and giggled. His mic was on and his whole team could hear as she pulled his head against her breasts and called him her good boy. The act had surprised him so much that he sprang from the couch, throwing her down to the floor. His team was laughing hysterically as he was yelling at her and chasing her out of the house, swinging the Xbox controller like a madman. To this day, what few of his gaming buddies from those days that remained, they still poke fun at him over it. Anyways, that was story one. On to story number two per the title. She tried to kick me out of my own freaking house. June 2017, so a couple of months later. Dan was still in med school at this point and suffered a torn ACL in his knee. Wow, I am sorry to hear that. One of the worst injuries you can possibly get, within reason of course, but very bad. He'd been going to the gym regularly to stay in shape and live a healthy lifestyle, but the rigorous training caught up to him. When I got the call, I hauled butt to the hospital, still in my work clothes. I was given the entire rundown of what I'd need to do to aid him at home, maintain his appointments, administer his meds if needed, massage techniques to promote healing, etc. Dan was given 6 months to a year to fully recover from his injury, and it left him in a deep depression. He decided to give up med school. This was unpopular with a lot of his relatives, but it sent Betty into a tailspin. Guys, she freaked. And I mean freaked. Imagine that meme of the woman who screamed, "No!" when Donald Trump was elected the first time. It was just like that. "How could you do this? You're ruining your future," Betty said. "I can do something else. I don't want to become a doctor. You wanted that for me," Dan replied. "Did OP put you up to this? It's all her fault." I swear, this woman never misses a chance to demonize me. I went to hide out in the bathroom because my IBS was flaring up being near her. That was a fun 4 hours. Not. Dan was put on a limited schedule to make healing easier on him. He only had to go in twice a week and sit behind a desk in the dealership workshop. It kept his job, and I was taking on more shifts to offset our income. It left me physically exhausted, but it was only temporary until he could resume his regular schedule. Him getting healthy was what mattered. Betty had decided that me being away from home to work and keep a roof over our heads was considered spousal abuse and neglect, and she believed that I had forced Dan to drop out of med school. After I'd gotten home from work a few weeks into his recovery, I was shocked to see a moving van parked in my driveway. Betty was trying to move her stuff into my house. I had to park on the street as the van was taking up the entire drive. I went in to find Betty screaming at Dan, who was sitting on the couch looking defeated like he wanted to disappear. I asked what was going on and why Betty was in my frickin' house. "I'm not going to let you ruin my baby boy's future. I'm moving in and you're leaving." "Excuse me?" "That's right. I have the eviction notice right here." Betty handed me a piece of paper that had the word eviction clearly printed on a simple piece of printer paper. There was no letterhead or formal notice. It was simply her words printed on paper that said I had to leave immediately or the police would be called to escort me out of her and Dan's home. Imagine if that was how evictions work, by the way. I'd be going straight to central London, finding the nicest flat I could, and walking in there with some A4 and saying, "Listen, I'm sorry guys, you got to read the paper. You're done." I looked at Dan, who was on the verge of tears by this point. Torn ACL or not, he should have had the frickin' balls to stand up to her. I was exhausted and just wanted to take a shower and get some sleep as I had work the next day, but I was forced to deal with this situation. I looked at Betty, who was looking smug. I looked at Dan, who wouldn't make eye contact with me. You ever just decide to let someone hang themselves? Yeah, I called her bluff. I looked back at her and I smiled. She genuinely seemed unnerved by this, especially when I told her to call the police. She took out her phone and called them. The lies she spewed had me reeling. She said I was abusive, controlling, and I'd purposefully injured him to make him quit med school, that I was illegally in her house and I was refusing to leave. I made it a point to grab a beer out of the fridge, walk past her into my living room and sit down in a chair. I put my feet on the coffee table, she hates this, and I crack open that beer and take a sip. I took the TV remote and began flipping through the channels, just to be petty. When the police arrived, I said to Betty that if she was going to move in, she needs to make herself useful and open the door. I had a long day and I wanted to put my feet up. Yeah, I was being extra female doggy. I don't care. She let the police in and guided them into the living room and pointed at me. "That's her. She's refusing to leave my house." "Mom, are you aware you're currently trespassing into this woman's home?" the police said. "Well, I don't know how I can do that when her home is on the other side of town. This isn't her home. It's mine and my husband's." "Wait, I'm confused. This isn't your house?" "No, it is. Dan owns it and wants me to move in to take care of him. Dan, tell them I live here." Dan didn't answer. Betty looked annoyed, and I laughed. "You need to leave," she said. "So, wait," the policeman said. "Who owns this house? You or him?" "Officer, my husband and I are currently renting this house from a landlord. I can give you his number to call. Betty doesn't live here. She is the one trespassing." "Well, that isn't true. Dan owns this house. He told me. Officer, make her leave now." The officer ignores her and takes the phone number for my landlord and calls it. After confirming that it was, of course, mine and Dan's home, he came back. "Okay, so I spoke with your landlord and confirmed that Miss OP and Mr. Dan are the current tenants and you are not on the lease. Unless they say you can stay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Betty looked at me then at Dan. He looked away from her. "You better tell them, Dan." "Mum, please leave. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Betty," I add. "Right, that's all I needed. Okay, Miss Betty, it's time to go." She just went berserk. When the officer took her by the arm, she shoved him in the chest as she tried to walk out. The officer grabbed her and told her she was being arrested for assault, and she began shrieking that he was trying to R-word her. She was screaming hysterically as he put her on the floor and put her in cuffs. Dan and I watched as another officer stepped inside to assist, and she was carried out. She was kicking and spitting at the cops as she screamed bloody murder. She got charged with resisting arrest and an assault on an officer. She only spent a night in jail and got let out on bail after seeing the judge. She cancelled the moving van and they had to haul her stuff back to her house. She ended up going no contact with us until Thanksgiving, which, again, I wasn't invited to. A few quiet, peaceful months. This is, I don't know, it's almost like a fever dream. I can't quite believe what I'm reading. It's time to take a stand, lovelies. Okay, so after the 2 posts I made today, those were the 2 posts I read in the last episode, I compiled all of the comments from them and the previous posts, and I sat down with my husband to talk about them. At first, he tried to dismiss my feelings, saying I need to move on from the past, and that his mother isn't the crazy female dog she used to be. I told him that she still is the crazy female dog she used to be, because she flat out declared she wanted to F him on St. Patrick's Day, and cried about how she couldn't because he's too busy effing the tramp that married him, me. He used the "she was drunk" excuse, and I said that a drunk mind spews sober thoughts, exactly. She is sexually attracted to her son, and he knows it, and she spent the last 11 years grooming him into being with her in that fashion. When I first started writing these posts, I said she hadn't tried being with him like that, but the more I've written, I'm realizing she freaking has, and I'd put my blinders on to avoid admitting the truth. I'm freaking sick to my stomach. The realization has hit me so hard, like a ton of bricks. I'll admit that I've repressed a lot of the horrible memories, and reliving the trauma has been really difficult on me, but it's cathartic to finally let it all out. I also realise I've made more excuses for my husband than I should have, and he's very much to blame for the heck his mother has put me through. My husband tried to argue that because he looks a lot like his dad, his mother is having a hard time letting go, and he's just trying to help her. But I countered that by saying his father died years ago, and a mother shouldn't be trying to abuse their own child in that way just because they are the spitting image of their husband who died from cancer. I told him to consider what he was saying and how crazy he sounded. No parent should look at their child that way. I even told him that I refuse to have children with him if that woman is going to be a part of our lives, and this is how she's going to act. I won't expose any child to her madness. He got upset and tried to shut the conversation down, but I wouldn't let him. So, I gave him an ultimatum. Either he gets into therapy and has her committed, or goes no contact, or I'll be speaking to my father about getting a divorce attorney. I told him I love him and don't want to end our marriage, but I refuse to let this go on anymore. I'm tired of the constant rug sweeping. I'm tired of her disrespecting me. I'm tired of all of it. And if he wants to keep our marriage intact, he needs to put me first and her into her frickin' place. Either he wants to be married to me or he wants to be his mother's partner. He can't be both. Right now, he's sitting on the back porch and won't talk to me. I feel like this is the breakdown of my marriage, but you are all right. I've put up with more than I should have. I might go and stay with my parents for a while. For those wondering, my parents aren't fully aware of every incident with Betty. I've shielded them from a lot of it to protect my husband because my father would not hold back if he knew all of it. I'll continue to write, but tonight I think I need to sleep on this and consider my next move if my husband won't work with me. Wow, damning words, but it's got to this point clearly. Right, let's get straight into the next post, guys, because that same night, even more stuff went down. Titled, I Went to My Parents. After I posted last night, I tried to talk to him one more time. He said he would think about what I said, and that was it. He slept on the couch. When we got up this morning, he wouldn't even look at me. I asked him if he was okay, and he said he wasn't. I asked to talk about it, and he exploded. He said he'd called his mum last night to try talking to her and get some kind of clarity into what exactly she wants from him. He told her what I said, and she went into how I was the manipulative one, making up lies and trying to turn him against her. I asked him how could he believe her, and he said he didn't know who to believe. How is he still not understanding this? It's insane. I said I couldn't believe him and that he knows her behavior isn't normal. He said he knew that, but he didn't think it went as deep as I thought it went. He said my ultimatum was unfair and that it puts him in a bad position, and he can't choose between me and his mum. He wants us both in his life, and he doesn't want to lose either of us. I said that it was unfair that I was nearly run over with a freaking car. It was unfair that I went through the trouble of trying to be nice to her many times, only for her to spit in my face and disrespect me because she wants to be her son's mistress. I said it wasn't fair that she'd ruined holidays for me because she insisted on making him feel guilty for not running back to her arms if he wanted to spend them with me. He said it wasn't true and that it wasn't that serious. I asked, what parent acts like that towards their kids? What if we had kids? A son, how would she behave towards him? I said that after everything that has happened over the last 13 years since we first got together, there is no way I will allow that woman to plague our marriage anymore. I've given him multiple chances to be firm with boundaries and stay low contact to avoid incidents like the ones from the past happening again. He said he understood how I felt, but he didn't want to believe his mother was that sick. I asked him about therapy again, and he blew up, saying he didn't need it, and I was the crazy one and should consider his feelings. I said I had been for 11 years, and I've tried to be understanding and cooperative, but after reading all of your comments and realizing I'd kept blinders on to avoid seeing the truth, I couldn't anymore. He said it wasn't fair that a bunch of strangers on the internet were dictating what happens in our marriage, and that he wanted me to delete the posts and never come on Reddit again. I said no, and that I won't separate myself from the only support I've had in frickin' ever. He called me a female dog and grabbed his keys and left. He never calls me that. For those of you that may not know, I always censor that word. You could probably work out what word it is. He didn't actually use the words female dog, but you know, the word beginning with B. I spent an hour crying before I called my mum. I felt bad I'd woken her up, but I needed her. I told her that Dan and I got into a massive fight and that I needed to stay with her and Dad for a while. She insisted I come over immediately. I packed some things and I went straight there. Mum and Dad sat with me at the dining room table as I spilled my guts out to them all night. It's the weekend, so they're fortunately off work. My dad is furious. He said many times he wanted to go and set Dan straight. Violently. I told him no, it wasn't worth that, and that I just need their support right now. We went out for breakfast and we're back at their place now. Mum and I are sipping tea in the backyard while Dad practices his golf swing, hopefully not to use on Dan. I have several texts on my phone from Dan and some from Betty. He apparently went running to her and cried. Many of the texts are him begging me to come back to him, and some are insulting me by telling me I need help and I'm a crazy female dog, followed by a barrage of apologies that he didn't mean it. Betty has texted me saying I'm a stupid female dog, that I don't deserve her precious baby boy, and that she will take care of him in his time of need. She also texted me a picture of them together with her holding his hand. I wanted to throw up. I didn't answer any of the texts, so now they're harassing me, trying to get me on the phone. Dad told me just to keep all of this as evidence of harassment. I'm pretty much resigned to the fact that my marriage is over. Dad's going to call his divorce lawyer friend and set up an appointment for me. My mum's insisted I get myself into therapy ASAP. I'm calling to make an appointment on Monday. This is all a lot, and I'm overwhelmed. Dan and I moved into our current house a year ago, so now I'm having to consider moving out. Our names are on the deed, and I don't know the first thing about selling a house. Thank God my parents are lawyers. I've not slept much today, so I'm probably going to take a very long shower and have a nap. If I'm feeling up to it, I'll post another story today. But right this moment, I barely have the mental capacity to sit down and type this out. I have a test coming up that I need to study for, and I haven't even started that. I'm so freaking done. Okay. So worrying stuff, I suppose, is what I will say so far. One more post to come in this episode, guys. And I'm going to be honest, it's just not looking good for these two. It's not looking good. Arguably, and I think, you guys were saying it in the comments as well, and I agree with you, this probably should have happened a lot earlier. Like, not earlier in terms of OP telling the story and posting on Reddit, but just like years before. However, sometimes it just takes looking back through your relationship or looking back through your life at events that happened, you didn't like, but you've sort of, as OP said, forgotten about them or forgot how bad they were or put blinders on and not fully understood them, to then have a look back and go, oh, actually, now with the benefit of hindsight and not being in that situation, this was way worse than I first thought. And I think, yeah, compiling all these stories together has made OP realize that, of course, with the help of Reddit comments as well, saying, what is going on here? You need to open your eyes. So we're in this situation. One more post to come in this one. And I'll just say it doesn't get much better from now. So that happened. Hey, lovelies. Thank you for all the support. It really has helped. I only wish you could do more to save me from the absolute lunacy that I just experienced. I can't even begin to comprehend what just happened. I checked my phone after my nap and there was a voicemail from Betty. I'll type what was said. Listen, OP, I spoke to X. Oh, interesting. OP's changed DH, which stood for dear husband. I was calling him Dan, to now X. Wow. Anyway, I spoke to X and it's really not right that you just left the way you did. You're not doing well and you need help. Oh, the irony. I promise support through your recovery. I hope you know that. You and X really need to work things out and start trying for kids. He thinks it will fix your broken marriage. You need to get yourself together. Don't throw away your marriage. Remember, I love you and I love Dan. Please call me back so we can discuss this. Love you. Bye. Oh my goodness me. How involved does this woman want to be? I wanted to cry. How is this being turned around on me? It's broken because of you, you female dog. I let my parents listen to the voicemail and my mother had to hold my father back. They said she was trying to gaslight and manipulate me and not to believe a word of it. Don't worry, mum and dad. I know. But it still sucks that they're trying to make me out to be the lunatic when all I've done is protect what mattered most to me. My freaking husband. After that voicemail, I became very afraid of what they may do. My husband has been badgering me about kids for a few years, and I worry that he might resort to drastic measures to get them if his mother has a say in the matter. I'm adding seeing my gyno about birth control to my list of stuff to do come Monday. I asked my parents to come with me to the house so I can collect more of my things. When we got there, I saw my ex's car in the driveway. When we got inside, he ran at me and pulled me into a hug and said it was great that I came to my senses and came home. I pushed him off and I told him I wasn't staying and I was only grabbing more of my stuff. Then I saw her, Betty, in my kitchen. She put on a fake smile and acted like we were besties. OP, I'm so glad you're here. We can finally have a talk. It was then she noticed my parents and glared at them. I thank my lucky stars they came with me because I don't know if I'd have been able to defend myself if she and Dan cornered me. I told her there wasn't anything to talk about and I went into my bedroom. She and Dan tried to follow, but my dad stood in front of the door and told them to leave me alone. My ex backed down, but not Betty. You need to move. I need to speak to my daughter-in-law. You can talk to her through her attorney. Me, my dad replied. You don't need to be involved in this. This is a family matter. Wow, if she really did say that, that's absolutely insane. My mum then said, we are her family, so anything you have to say, you can say to us. Betty looked like she wanted to slap my mother. If she had, I doubt even my 6'2", 250-pound father would be able to stop me. Fine, have it your way. Dan, I tried to tell you what a dumb tramp she is, but you wouldn't listen. At this point, I lost it. Betty, you are the dumb tramp. You've been trying to F your own son since before we got married. Your behaviour has been disgusting, and you and him both have destroyed my marriage beyond repair. All I ever did was support him and protect him and love him through everything. You've both put me through heck, and I'm done. You can go F each other and be happy together for all I care. I'm getting my stuff and leaving. I don't want to see either of you anymore. You won, Betty. You can frickin' have him. Betty was positively beaming. My ex was looking like he just wanted to cry. Finally, she said. Stop it, Mum. OP, you're being unreasonable. We can get you help, Dan added. Stop. You're not going to turn this around on me or gaslight me again. You can go and F yourself. Better yet, go and F your mum. Well, I'll be better than you ever were. You're a dead fish in bed. Mum, said Dan. Everyone suddenly went silent. My father went pale, and my mother looked horrified. I could only stare at her in complete shock as she was looking at me all smug. I then looked at Dan, who looked embarrassed. You won't even deny it, will you? Is that what you want? You want to be with your own mother like that? No, I don't. Betty looked at Dan, and I saw the disappointment on her face. and she looked like she'd just got her feelings hurt, and it made me feel sick. Then explain it to me, Dan. Why are you allowing her to be like this with you? Why are you catering to it? She's grooming you, you idiot. Listen to what she just frickin' said. That's not normal. Betty was looking angry as Dan turned to look at her. Tell me the truth, Mum. Is that what you've been trying to do? She's lying again, baby. I've only ever loved my baby boy. She's just jealous of the love we have. She said it so manipulatively, and I wanted to scream. He is not a baby anymore, you dense female dog. My mum then said, OP, enough. Just get your things so we can leave, okay? I don't want to be here anymore, and your father is getting upset. I then looked at Dan. Dan, it's over. I want a divorce. As strong as I felt in that moment, internally my world was shattering. I went back to packing. Dan was begging, trying to reason with me, but I wasn't interested. My dad gestured for Dan to go into the living room, and both he and Betty sat on the couch. I started carrying my bags outside, and I saw her holding his head against her breasts and caressing his freaking head as he pitifully cried like a child. On the car ride back to my parents, I cried miserably. I can't believe that is the man I married. He used to be so strong and stood up to his mother regularly, but now it's like he's a meek little boy who is too afraid to say no to her. Someone in the comments on a previous post suggested that something already has happened between them. I used to think that couldn't be the case, but now I firmly believe something did happen between them, and he is too scared to admit it. I asked my parents if there was someone we could call about their relationship, and my dad said unless I have concrete evidence, there's not much anyone could really do. Adult Protective Services is primarily for vulnerable adults like the elderly or disabled, not full-grown mama's boys. I'm sitting alone in the backyard right now, contemplating what my life will be like from this point forwards. I'm trying to envision it, but all I keep seeing is an empty room and I'm completely alone. My parents have assured me that I can stay for as long as I need to, but I feel like such a burden on them. I'm not a child, but I definitely don't feel like an adult at the moment, and I need them. I'm so lost and devastated. My home is gone, my marriage gone, my life gone. Everything I'd built is gone. 13 years. 13 years I can never get back. I'm going to use some vacation time from work and take a short leave from law school so I can recuperate. I'm not in the right mental state to be focusing on either one right now. I have so much to do and my mind is just in a fog. I'll update if anything happens. I was going to write another Betty story today, but I just can't. I'm really sorry, guys. Thank you for understanding. Well, there we go. It's not looking good, is all I can say after that. I think it's very reasonable that you're feeling terrible about this and you're crying and you're upset, but ultimately, like from my perspective, you have made the right decision. The fact that, you know, he is in his mum's like bosom as you are going off with your parents, crying, him crying, is like insane. Like, yeah, give her a hug, but he's just acting like a 4-year-old child. It's really, really weird. I hadn't thought about that comment that somebody else said. Had something sexual perhaps happened with the two of them before? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about that. I'd love to say that has never happened, and I hope it hasn't, obviously, but who knows at this stage? Anything is possible with Betty and Dan, it seems. Now, don't worry, there are more posts to come, and we do go back and have a look at some more of the old chronicles of Betty. I feel bad for OP, but I think this is the start of the next step, and it's definitely like a step in the right direction. Goodness me. He left me a voicemail. I'm scared. I'm having to listen to it over and over so I can type it all out. I want you all to frickin' read this trash. This gets very bad. Trigger warning. OP, please call me back. I don't know what to do. Mum is going crazy and I'm really scared. After you left, she tried to kiss me and I had to push her off. She slapped me and I had to lock myself in the bedroom because she started throwing stuff. I just don't know what to do here. She's still out there throwing things and I'm wondering, do I call the police? Do I jump out the window? I'm freaking losing it, babe. She's been telling me that you're crazy and trying to come between us and that she is the only one who loves me. We then hear her screaming in the background. No, Mum, please leave. I don't want to talk to you right now. OP, I'm just really very scared. Please call me. We then hear her scream at him again and hear banging. Please stop, Mum. I want you to go home. Please stop trying to get in. I'm so stupid, babe. I started going to her house more when you thought I was working. She's been hitting me and calling me names and threatening to hurt herself. I'm scared, babe. I hear the banging one more time. Please, call me back. I called the police right after I heard this. I've not heard anything yet, but I'm very worried right now. I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I called again and no answer. I let my parents listen to the voicemail. They're also worried, and my mum suggested going over there, but Dad is too worried about Betty being there if we did. The text above doesn't even begin to describe the desperation in my ex's voice in that voicemail. He sounded genuinely afraid of her. I can't do anything but wait. If I hear anything, I'll let you guys know. Wow, what a start to this one. All right, I don't want to leave you guys on any sort of cliffhanger here. Let's get straight into the next post. Now, thankfully, the title of this one is He's Okay. I finally heard from him and the police. I hadn't heard anything, so I phoned our local police department, and after getting transferred around, I finally got a hold of one of the officers who went to the house. They told me when they got to the house, they were let in by an older woman who was acting hysterical. She brought them to the bedroom door, and she told them she was worried about her son, who just got away from his abusive wife, but that he'd locked himself in and wouldn't come out. I told them she was the abusive one. I never abused him. I told them about the voicemail, and they said he didn't accuse her of assault, but when he opened the door, he was visibly shaking and looked very scared. They suspected something was going on, but given he didn't point the finger at Betty, they couldn't do much. The cop separated them and spoke to my ex in the living room. He said he was upset because his marriage had fallen apart. When asked about Betty's accusations against me, he said I'd never abused him and his mum had lied. Betty, however, lied to the other officer, telling them that I was an abusive and controlling witch that was jealous of their bond. The officer told her that unless my ex files charges for spousal abuse, they couldn't do anything about that. The officer I spoke to told me that he asked Dan if he wanted Betty out of the house, and he said he did. He said that Betty became threatening towards my ex after this, getting very close to him and standing over him and telling him to tell them he didn't want her to leave. The officer said his partner took Betty by the arm and escorted her out of the house. She resisted, but after the threat of arrest, she calmed down and left without incident. I thanked the officer and hung up. I ended up calling my ex again, and this time he answered. He said he was okay, just very scared of his mother. He was worried she'd come back. He kept saying he was scared, so I told him to come to my parents' house. I woke them up and I told them what happened. To say they're annoyed is a massive understatement. Betty is a menace. Dan's here right now, sleeping in the guest room, and I'm in my old bedroom. I don't even want to think about the marriage right now. I just want to make sure he is safe and away from this cancer of a woman. All right, crazy scenes going on here. I mean, every single time she gets worse. Okay, and then the next day we got the following post titled We Talked. So I just got back to my parents' place after an extremely long day. I was able to get in with my OB and get another round of birth control. I spoke with the divorce attorney and went to the bank and transferred half of the joint account into my individual account. My ex and I met up for lunch, and my parents were present at another table just to keep watch. We talked, and he told me a lot of truths that he's been harboring inside for years. He elaborated about what he said in the voicemail, that he's been secretly visiting his mum while he was supposed to be at work, per her demands, using guilt trips and manipulation to get him to bend to her will. He'd been skipping work and going straight to her house once or sometimes twice a week to cater to her. At first, the visits were casual and they would talk and have coffee. Eventually, it progressed into physical things like a lot of hugging and cuddling on the couch and watching TV. If she were in the kitchen or the bathroom, she would call for him to check her phone for messages she was expecting, only to have naked pictures of her on the screen, and she would ask him if she looked good without clothes on. He'd get uncomfortable and tell her he didn't want to see that. She'd get upset with him and then start yelling at him. During one visit, she tried to sit in his lap and make him hold her. He got angry and told her to get off. She began hitting him and ripping his shirts as she was screaming at him that he was a horrible son and he must hate her, and she wanted to harm herself. She'd refer to him by his father's name sometimes, and when he would tell her he wasn't his father, she would brush it off and say she meant to say his own name, then tell him to be a good boy and help her with whatever she wanted him to do. Household chores, cooking food, massaging shoulders, or cuddling with her, to name a few. She would routinely ask him about his and my sex life and asked about kids. He told her that we hadn't really tried for children, and she would demand that he get me pregnant as soon as possible so that she could become a grandmother. She would then ask creepy questions about what their children would look like if they had any. It got to a point where she would demand to check his genitals to make sure he was healthy. He'd refuse, of course, and she'd react by screaming, hitting, and threats of self-harm. The longer I listened to the absolute lunacy coming out of his mouth, I was growing more and more disgusted. I asked him, how long has this been going on for? And he said, 4 years. He then admitted that she stole my birth control and dumped it into the toilet before we'd got there yesterday, which was why I couldn't find it when I was packing my things. I didn't think it was important, as sometimes I forget to take it, so it wasn't on my mind at the time. He told me that she hadn't counted on my parents coming with me, and they'd ruined her plan to corner me and pressure me into taking my ex back and getting pregnant ASAP. Even if that were to happen, there is no way in heck I would ever allow that monster around any child I might have. After we sat in silence for a while, he asked about our marriage. I said that it wasn't important right now, but that I don't think us being together is healthy, and I'm still hurt by how he treated me for her. He said he was afraid of her. He thought he had no choice. I told him he always had a choice, and catering to her for 4 years like this has emboldened her to disregard the freaking law. She believes that she is untouchable, and he has allowed her to believe it. Even though he is a victim of SA from her, he could and should have ended it by going to the police a long time ago. He started crying and said I didn't understand the fear he felt. I said I'd help him in any way I could, but I won't resume our marriage with him as it was. We will live separate lives apart from one another, and there will be no cohabitating until I say so, if I say so. I do not want there to be any accidents where I might fall pregnant. I also stipulated that he will get into therapy to help him get through his issues. He tried to argue about living together, but I said if he didn't respect how I felt, then I'd be forced to wash my hands of all of this and proceed with the divorce as I originally planned. He agreed and dropped it. After we ate, we went to the police station. With some gentle words of encouragement, he told the police everything. He provided texts and voicemails that he still had on his phone as evidence, and I did the same. They will be opening an investigation, and they've given my ex the number for a victim's advocate and a list of therapists. Because this is 100% SA. It may not have resulted in them sleeping together, but the detective said that if it continued, it would definitely happen. She had been methodically and emotionally breaking my ex down since he was a child. We were able to get to the District Court Commissioner's office and apply for PPO. After my ex detailed the abuse and said he is in fear of mine and his safety, it's been granted temporarily. We will require an actual court hearing to determine the duration of the PPO, and we're hoping to go for the maximum time allowed. Okay, just looked it up. Apparently PPO stands for Police Protection Order. Goodness me. Held by police officers to protect a child from harm if they believe there is imminent danger. Wow. I did expect some resistance from my ex, but he is surprisingly on board. I told him if he's just going to back out and go running back to her, then this will be the end of any interaction I have with him going forward. He assured me that he had no intention of backing out and he was ready to stand up to her. I'm skeptical, but we'll see what happens. In case you're wondering, yes, Betty has been calling my ex all day, blowing up his phone, demanding to know where he is. She's tried calling me as well, but I never answered. Out of concern, she might show up to the house. My ex will be staying in a hotel for a few days until she can be served with that order. We know she'll contest it, and I'm counting on it. I have years worth of proof though and witness testimony to nail her flabby 56-year-old butt to the wall. Okay, wow, a lot to unpack. There is more to come, but we're going back a little bit further and Opie's going to tell us a few more stories from back in the day. But yeah, as I said, for now, that's sort of where we're at, I suppose, in terms of what's going on currently, or at least a week or so ago at the time of recording. But yeah, scary stuff. So far, I don't think we've seen Betty actually try and kiss Dan. I think that's right. I mean, I don't think we've seen that yet. It's crazy that the detective is saying, look, if this continues, then maybe they've seen something like this before. That's why they're in a position to say, I think this is what's going to happen. But I don't want to misquote, but they literally said she will at some point try and sleep with you. Like that was the aim, which is just an absolutely insane thing. But I think you, OP, have handled this as well as you possibly could have, because you're not like fully writing Dan off. You're not saying, look, I've broken up with you now, I'm going to get a divorce, therefore you're no longer in my life. You do still love this guy, or at least have loved him, and you are still, I think, in the right way, making sure that he's okay and helping him out and offering him safety, because clearly this guy needs it. You do as well, but he does too. Crazy stuff. My mother-in-law spray painted my new car. Hey lovelies, thank you for your patience as I've been going through quite a lot the last few days. Due to recent events, Dan will now be referred to as X and Betty is still Betty. Just to explain that, OP actually posted quite a few posts just to her own private Reddit page. Well, not private, but her own personal Reddit page rather than on r/entitledpeople like this one. Anyway, I wanted to keep up with the Betty timeline on this subreddit, EntitledParents, so anything recent you'll find on my profile, and that's what I've looked at over the last couple of episodes. It's been a lot, and I'm still processing and coming to terms with all of it. Trigger warning though, it's not for the faint of heart. Anyway, this excerpt from the Bat Crazy Betty Chronicles takes place just after Christmas of 2017. I've been driving a car my parents had given to me since I was 16, and it was beginning to show signs of its age. It was a used 2012 Jeep Wrangler with well over 100,000 miles on it. I absolutely loved that car. I'd pimped it out. It was white, purple fuzzy seat covers, a purple fuzzy steering wheel cover, a bumper sticker that read, "Girl driver with an attitude," and a decent sound system. It wasn't the greatest car, but I loved it. Eventually, I had to let it go, as it was getting to be way more expensive just to fix the problems with it when buying a new car would just be cheaper. My dad went with me to look at a used car lot. No Jeeps, but they did have a lot of Toyotas. I went with a white 2015 Toyota Corolla. It had roughly 30,000 miles on it and had a minor problem with the passenger side window that could be fixed, but other than that, it was in great condition. 2 days later, Betty is blowing up my ex's phone, demanding to know about the car. My ex told her it was my new car because I had to let go of the Jeep. Betty began screeching about how I was using his money to pay for a brand new luxury car. I told her I used our money out of our joint bank account and that the car was not a luxury brand and it was 2 years old at that point. She got annoyed and demanded that her son return the car. Better yet, bring it to her. If anyone deserved a new car, it was her. Nice try, Betty. I told her to go and F herself, and my ex hung up on her. Later that night, there was a knock at the door. I answered it, and it was our neighbor. He asked if I knew what happened to my car. I looked outside, and what I saw had my jaw on the floor. My white car had been spray painted with bright red spray paint. And it wasn't just a little bit, it was all over the car. On the windshield was the word tramp. The driver's side mirror was hanging off and one of the taillights had been busted out. I called my ex outside and he was equally as shocked and annoyed. I began crying and he called his mother. She admitted to it right away and said I was a home-wrecking gold digger that deserved it. And if my ex had just given her the car, it wouldn't have happened. I went inside and promptly called the police. My ex didn't even attempt to defend her. He knew I would have torn into him if he tried. The police came and took my report, took pictures of the car, and took a copy of our neighbour's surveillance video. We didn't have cameras yet. And then went straight to Betty's house and arrested her. She was forced to stay in lockup until January 2nd when everything reopened again. Betty denied any involvement, but with the surveillance video as evidence, she didn't have a leg to stand on. She was given 60 days probation and was ordered to pay for the damages. She dragged out paying for as long as she could, but my ex told her if she didn't pay up, he'd be going no contact. She wrote me a check. I was able to get the damages fixed and the paint removed. Bonus was she paid for the messed up passenger side window too, because my ex told her she had damaged it. I won't look a gift horse in the mouth. Now, the more and more I read these stories from, 2017, even earlier, so look, 8 years ago, and then we jump, by the way, like we're about to do, into sort of the modern day, present day, 2025, and these things are still sort of going on. The more I just feel like surely something should have been done a decade ago or more. Like, you had all the crazy stuff going on here in 2017, yet still in the present day, you're posting OP on Reddit about all this stuff that's currently going on with you, Betty, and your ex. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's easier for me to say, looking back now, and when you're actually in that situation, you don't fully understand how bad things are. And I know that OP has said that before, but still, like, come on. We're now about to jump into the present day, 8 years after this story happened. Well, almost 8 years after this story happened. And arguably nothing's really changed, which is a little bit sad. But yeah, that's it for the spray painting story. Now, let's jump forward again into the present day. Mostly been quiet. Hey lovelies, I appreciate you all being so patient. The last couple of days have been fairly quiet, but occasionally I think I can hear Betty's wailing from across town. Maybe it's the wind. Betty was served with that PPO, which, to remind everyone, is a police protection order. My ex texted me that after she was served, she immediately called him and left a very hateful voicemail. He said that she screamed into the phone and her voice was so loud, her voice would cut off at certain parts. But what he was able to hear was a lot of threats, insults, and vitriol aimed at both him and myself. I've not listened to it, and I don't think I want to. Just listening to the sound of her voice in a normal setting caused my IBS to flare up. I told him it was best to block her number going forward, and he did just that. She did go to his house, and the Ring camera did notify me. I checked it, and she was there banging on the door, demanding to be let in. I informed her she was trespassing, and the police were on their way. She was sent running with her tail between her legs. She hasn't been back. I did forward the footage over to the detective, and my ex sent over the voicemail. She's now recruited her relatives to harass her son. These are relatives that would never call unless they needed to borrow money, and never just to chat or to check in once in a while. Thankfully, my ex has told them where to stick it, and they've not called back. Except for his cousin, who is quite possibly the most invasive and nosy little poop, and is right there on par with Betty's levels of entitlement and boundary stomping. She can't keep a job because she's a kleptomaniac and has gotten caught stealing more than once. She's got a lengthy rap sheet full of theft charges, and somehow she's managed to avoid serious jail time. She can't keep friends for long because she ends up screwing them over by sleeping with their boyfriends or trash talking them until they find out about it. Her mother, Betty's sister, is pretty entitled herself and never holds her daughter accountable. This brazen little C-word came to my 10-year-old cousin's birthday party and called my cousin fat and made fun of her for eating cake, then talked rubbish about her for crying. Her mother and Betty were also there and laughed at the cruel jokes. My uncle threw them all out because no one messes with his little girl. My uncle is my mum's older brother, a kick-butt Marine who takes no trash from anybody and is one of the funniest people I know, but I digress. Just giving you guys a glimpse into the Looney Tune factory that is Bat Crazy Betty's family. I too have received calls from her relatives and I never answered them. I'm not the least bit interested in what they have to say. I only have their numbers and addresses to keep track of who to send out Christmas cards to every year. Why do you send them Christmas cards? That's my question. Surely delete all contacts. I've blocked most of their numbers. Betty hasn't shown up to my parents' house in case you're wondering. Despite how bold she's been, she is not brave enough to F with my parents. Again, they are lawyers and they would annihilate her in court. She can't call me because I have her blocked. As for my ex and I, we talked a bit more in depth about our relationship. I will not be fighting this battle for him. If he wants to fight it, he has to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet, and he can't use me or anyone else as a buffer to avoid facing his problems. I told him we can remain on speaking terms and maintain a friendly and amicable separation, but that is as far as I'm willing to go for now. He's started going to therapy. He had his first session yesterday. He told me it's still a bit weird for him, and in some ways it feels like he's betraying her, but he's going to stick with it, and understands that what he's feeling right now is just a side effect of the persistent conditioning that she's inflicted on him, and he needs time to adjust and come to terms with it all. I give him credit for the self-awareness, but so far I remain unconvinced. If and when he shows signs of genuine improvement, we can discuss lifting some of the boundaries I set. I'm seeing a therapist on Friday, and I'm actually feeling good about it. I decided to return to work because I will not be 29 years old and bumming money off my parents, and I miss my customers who I've grown close with over the years. Anyway, that is the update so far. Thank you again for everything. But OP has actually added a little edit on the end of this one as well, saying this: "Hey guys, I don't want to make a new post, so I'm just adding this here. I just got off the phone with my ex, who called me in tears, sobbing that he is struggling and just needed to vent a little. I said go ahead, and he told me that what he talked about in therapy has really hit him hard and he doesn't know how to process it. I told him if he wasn't comfortable telling me, he didn't have to, but he said he needed to because I deserved to know the truth. He told me before that his mother demanded to check his genitals to make sure he was healthy, but it went deeper than that. She would hit and threaten him until he took his pants off, and she would grab him. One time, she yanked on it so hard, he thought she was trying to tear it off, and he went to hospital. He told me the date, and this correlated to a hospital visit he claimed was for a staph infection last year. I told my ex that he needs to call his therapist ASAP because I am not equipped or capable of giving him advice or helping him cope. I've not dealt with SA, and all I can really understand is that it's immoral and evil, but I don't understand the human mind that has to process that trauma or how to build coping mechanisms. I let my ex cry for a little while until he was calm enough and he fell asleep on the call. I'm keeping the call going, so if he wakes up, he'll know I'm there and feel secure enough to keep sleeping. We used to do this as teenagers, and we'd sleep on calls together. Despite the fact that I do still refuse to fight this battle for him, I am involved, and I won't abandon him when he's teetering. I decided to add this to the list of things to discuss with my therapist that I'm seeing on Friday, on how I can be more help to my ex while he's going through this. I'm freaking seething right now. I want to go over there and throttle her, but I know that would only make things worse for my ex and the investigation. My ex and I are meeting with the detective on Monday next week to discuss the progress of the case. We'd love a swift resolution, but these things take time, and I'm committed to seeing that monster behind bars. Anyway, sorry for the late update. I'm going to try and get some sleep. Good night, lovelies. Goodness me, this was posted actually at 4:48 a.m. my time. This is in America, I'm pretty sure, so not entirely sure when this is going to be in the US, but yeah, late anyway, in the evening, and well, clearly Opie and her ex are going through a lot right now. I don't know, I feel like we're going to get to the stage with this story where Dan's going to come out and say actually he was like R-worded by his own mum. I just feel like we're getting there, which is absolutely unbelievable to say. But yeah, I mean, I know you're already doing it, but the police just have to get involved now. I don't know if you can prove this stuff that Dan's saying happened, but it obviously just did. An arrest has been made. Not the one we are all hoping for, but an arrest regardless. My ex called me to let me know that one of his uncles had shown up to his house and tried getting in. He banged on the door, tried to kick it in, and broke a window to get inside. My ex is currently at work, so he witnessed all of this on the Ring camera. He called the police and they came right away. They found his uncle climbing out of the window and he surrendered without incident. When I had a second, I checked it too, and I saw the playback of the uncle climbing out the window and putting his hands up as the police swarmed him. I could hear him saying that he was told to come and check on my ex because his mother was worried about him. My ex is now panicking, wondering what his uncle has done inside the house. He was in there for around 10 minutes before the police got there. I think it's safe to say that Betty is now going to be arrested for her involvement in this situation, and hopefully they have enough evidence to keep her there. My ex will now be coming to stay with me and my parents because I will not allow him to get hurt. I'm sure that that's what his uncle was planning if he'd actually been home. I did have a quick chat with the detective and she assures me that she's doing all she can to bring this case to a speedy resolution and that she will speak to me on Monday when my ex and I go and see her. I watched the whole Ring footage. It's terrifying. He came in broad daylight and began beating on the door and yelling for Dan to come out. He said he wanted to talk and then tried to kick in the door when he got no response. He was yelling for me as well and calling me a female dog and said he had something for me too. I'm so thankful that Dan called the police. I'm beyond worried at this point because a lot of Betty's relatives are just this brazen and crazy. Goodness me, that is terrifying stuff. I mean, apart from the time where Betty tried to run you over, this is probably the next occasion where potentially your life has been in danger. Wow. No word yet. Hey lovelies, thank you again for all of your words of concern, praise and advice. I can't respond to every comment, so I'll answer a few things here. I do have Dan staying with me for the time being. He is staying in the guest room, and no, we're not working on our marriage. I am still hurt, and he has a lot to make up for, but we're focusing on his recovery and the criminal case for the time being. My parents love him like a son they never had, and while they too have expressed some apprehension about him and I residing under the same roof again, they do understand he needs our help and support, because Ethel knows he won't get it from his own family. Don't worry, I'm maintaining strict boundaries and I'm keeping him at arm's length. My ex is an emotional wreck after what his uncle did. Thankfully, nothing was broken or missing when the police checked it out. On the advice of someone in the comments on the last post, we asked the police to conduct a sweep for cameras. They didn't find any, so the house is secure for now. My ex is getting the locks changed with better security, and he was able to get someone to come give him an estimate for the window. The contractor is coming Monday to fix it, so it's boarded up for the time being. So far, Betty is still free. The detective is working on getting a warrant for her arrest. Dan's uncle is still in police custody. So far, the other relatives haven't messaged or called anymore. Betty hasn't tried contacting Dan since the police became more heavily involved. She is running scared and has gone radio silent. The police have gone to her house several times, and she never answers the door. Dan is feeling safer, but until she is behind bars, he's still paranoid and always looking over his shoulder. She's come to his job several times since the PPO was served to sit in the parking lot and try to talk to him. The manager has told her to leave, and the police have been called. She'd leave before they get there. I have my first therapy appointment today. I'm nervous, but I'm ready to begin my own healing. Anyway, that's it for the update. If anything happens, you guys will know about it. And as you can imagine, other stuff has happened, but first of all, let's hear about OP's therapy. She said the next day, therapy was good. Hey guys, just wanted to let you know about my therapy appointment yesterday. I asked all of the questions I wanted to, and she was incredibly nice and understanding about my concerns. In the hour I had with her, she didn't interrupt or try to offer advice until I asked her for it. I was able to let my emotions out and just cry without any judgment or balking. It feels good to have someone who will listen and not gaslight you or make you feel wrong for feeling the way you do. I'm comfortable sharing a couple of things we talked about. She gave me advice on how to be a better and supportive friend to Dan and how I can help him find safety with me given our current dynamic. She said that given his current state, he needs people he can rely on, and I don't have to know what to say, but just being there and being supportive is better than silence and distance. No problems there then. I asked about how I can do that without him trying to re-spark our relationship, and she said that by staying firm with boundaries and remaining calm, I can do it. That's key. Don't give him a reason to think he can't see me as a friend, but don't give him false hope. Honesty and boundaries. She said I'm doing a good job maintaining my boundaries and that staying honest will go a long way. I told her about my feelings about the dynamic between my ex and Betty. While at first it seemed like a mother being overbearing and overly protective of her child, it's turned into something dark and immoral. I asked her, how can a mother look at her own child and be sexually attracted to him? She said that mental illness and grief over the loss of his father could be factors in why her behaviour has spiraled so far out of control, but she's not met Betty, so she can't make a diagnosis on her mental health. She did though say that it is reprehensible and immoral to harm your child in that fashion, and even though I am not the main victim in this crime, it could take years for me to fully overcome the trauma. Hearing that made my heart sink, and I started to cry again. She said that every journey has a beginning, and when I reach the ending, the fight will be worth it. Whether or not Dan and I get back together, I'm in this fight with him, and I won't give up on him. Wow. Big, powerful words there, and it makes me sort of question what I said at the end of the last episode, when I was sort of questioning whether OP should be involved in the situation anymore, should even be looking out for Dan or really trying to help him when ultimately he's not really been trying to help himself for the last decade. But yeah, that's why I'm not a therapist, I suppose. Anyway, as for the rest of yesterday, still no word. My ex is still here at my parents' house. He and my dad are going golfing today. Mum and I are going shopping for a few needed things, and I might splurge on some retail therapy. We're all deciding where we want to go to eat out tonight. We've been arguing about it all morning. For the first time in a while, we all laughed at the silly insults and remarks. Even Dan. It feels like 2014 again. Anyway, until next time. Honestly, I'm still very conflicted as to where I stand with this. And I've read your comments on the last episode, and some of you actually agreed with me, some of you disagreed, but that's the beauty of it, I suppose. And you guys know me by now. If I've got something controversial to say, I won't shy away from saying it, even though I know it might not be popular. Like, especially, there was a video, I think, how long ago was it? 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe? Where you guys were having a go at me in the comments, and rightfully so, by the way. I got it wrong, and I'm happy to admit that. I would say this one thing, though, like when you're doing this sort of live, reacting live, which is what I try and do, I try and read it as in the moment as I can so that I can give my raw and honest reactions. Sometimes I don't give myself enough time to think, or I don't really want to give myself time to think. I just want to say what I want to say, right? And that can lead to potentially getting things wrong and not thinking about certain aspects of a situation. This one I've had a long time to think about because, it's been 9 episodes now and I'm still not sure. But I do think that if I was in this situation myself as Dan and I look back on my life and I didn't realize that at some point I have to go no contact with my mum permanently, then I think that would have been a mistake. I think it has to be, because again, I'm not in that situation, so it's easy to see from the outside looking in, but come on, man. Like, it's been, as you said at the end there, OP, it feels like 2014 again. It's been over a decade of this. Over a decade. And I have to say that I completely agree with everything your therapist has said, and you do need to help him out. And I do still think you do need to offer him help, and the help you're giving him is great. But it's been like this for a long time now. Like, how long can you go on like this? Is sort of the question I'm asking. And I think you have kind of answered it yourself in a way, because you now are like, look, I'm not even thinking about our relationship right now. You're calling him your ex in these posts, which is very telling. But yeah, I don't know. It gets to the point where you look at someone like Dan and you say, listen, mate, if you're not going to help yourself, then what's the point of me even trying? I also think that the therapist raised a good point, which is what I said at the end of last episode. Like, this trauma is going to take years for you to recover from, let alone Dan. And by staying in this situation for longer and longer, and again, it's been over a decade now, that is seriously negatively impacting you and your future. And you have to think about that sometimes. I know Dan's in a worse position, but this is really screwing with you as well. Food for thought. Once again, guys, let me know down below. I think you got to help him out. You do. But it gets to a point where you're like, mate, come on, what are you actually doing here? Good and bad news. Hey, lovelies. My ex and I just got back to our house from meeting with the detective, and we spoke with a few other people about the case. We're waiting for the contractors to arrive so the window can be fixed. My parents are also here, and we're door dashing some Chipotle. So the bad news first. My ex's uncle was released on bond, but under strict orders not to contact Dan or myself. The good news? The warrant has been signed, and the police are looking for her. The detective told us that after interviewing people over the last weekend, including me, my ex, my parents, and my ex's uncle, plus the evidence given to them so far, there is enough for them to at the very least charge Betty with harassment and stalking, petty theft, intimidation of a witness, and providing false statements to police. The detective said that felony evading could also be added. While the investigation is far from over and there's so much more evidence and witness statements to collect, what Betty is currently being charged with will keep her in jail unless she were able to make bail or the evidence proves to be circumstantial. The detective has spoken with the AITA and bail will hopefully be set high. That is if Betty can be found, because so far she is still free and hiding. I did ask what my ex's uncle said in his interview out of curiosity. The detective told us that he said that Betty had called him following the PPO being served. He said that Betty was distraught because my parents and I assaulted her, then forced her son to get the PPO against her so she couldn't see him anymore. She went to his house and knocked on the door, and the female dog of a wife of her son began shouting obscenities and threats of violence at her through the Ring camera and threatened to call the police. I could only laugh and shake my head at what my ex's uncle said. What a load of BS. But it does make sense why he was so angry at us. Betty lied to him, so a small part of me can't be mad at him for reacting the way he did. He was informed of the truth, though, during the interview. He did say that he always suspected something weird about Betty and Dan's relationship after his brother-in-law passed away. He's now annoyed at Betty for lying to him and putting him in this situation. So when the time comes, he is willing to testify against her. But I'm unsure if I trust him or not after what he did. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. On the one hand, yeah, it's nice now that he's willing to testify against her, but on the other hand, he just took everything she said at face value and was willing to come in with violence just because of something his sister said to him, knowing that she is just a crazy person at this point. Anyway, the detective wants to interview all of the relatives, including mine, that witnessed Betty's behavior over the years. So right now they're gathering names and numbers so they can request interviews, but Betty is still yet to be caught. The police have been to her house and knocked on the door, but there was never any answer. With the warrant, they can now break down the door. We're hoping that Betty is caught, and we remain optimistic. I'll let you guys know what happens when I hear about it. That crazy Betty turned herself in. Hey guys, Betty was arrested. She turned herself into the police station about 3 hours ago. Another detective contacted my ex and me to inform us of it. My ex is relieved, but torn over it. While I can't pretend to understand what he's going through at the moment, it's his mother, and there is a part of him that will always have love for her, despite what she's done to him. Me, personally, I'm over the moon. I feel like I can breathe a little easier, but I'm focusing on being a supportive shoulder for my ex to lean on. We don't know what made Betty decide to turn herself in or what happened, but we'll hear more in the coming days. I'm calling the detective tomorrow to find out more if possible. I wanted to give an answer about the people commenting that I shouldn't be giving up too many details of the case. While I have shared a few things, there is a lot that I have not. Just what my ex and I are comfortable with. Dan knows I still write, and as long as we remain anonymous, he's okay with it. This is my way of coping with everything going on, but I appreciate your concern. Okay, so there we go. Betty has turned herself in. I did not expect that at all. Let's jump straight into the next post though, where we find out exactly why she did this. Seems insane. I'm gobsmacked. So, I just got off the phone with the detective covering the case. She told me what happened when Betty came to the station. She came into the station yesterday, demanding to file a report against me for kidnapping, harassment, and assault. She claimed that I'd been keeping Dan locked up in our house for years, away from her and the family, harassing her by calling her and going to her house to attack her, and assault from when I moved my things out of the house. The police took her statement and none of it made any sense. The detective was informed she was there and politely asked to interview her. But during their talk, she informed her of the warrant out for her arrest. She said that Betty looked surprised and claimed it was all a big misunderstanding and that she'd only been trying to protect her child from the evil woman he was forced to marry. She was placed in handcuffs and taken into custody. I had hoped that maybe Betty had a miraculous change of heart and chose to turn herself in. Instead, she'd gone there with intentions of trying to get me arrested and play the victim like always. Once again, she couldn't resist the opportunity to demonize me in any way she could. My ex is furious, I am furious, my parents are furious, but we're also very relieved. She is finally behind bars, and she's seen the judge already as of this morning. Not sure what charges are sticking, but she was not given the option for bail pending the investigation, so that's good at least. She'll be stuck there for a long, long time. The investigation is now in full swing, and she's due to be interviewed regarding Dan's abuse in the coming days. The police are executing a search warrant of her house in hopes of gathering evidence, and much of her family is being sought for questioning. My own family has agreed to cooperate with the investigation, and they are calling to set up interviews. Dan has already received a call from the county jail. It was his mum calling. One more violation of the police protection order. My ex denied the call. I think hell is freezing over. I am proud of him. I'll keep you all informed of the progress of the investigation. Until next time. Okay, so there we go. Cliffhanger over. I actually didn't think it would end like this. Jesus, how dumb is she? Maybe she just didn't realize there was a warrant out for her arrest. That's probably the case, but if she was sort of on the run, or at least avoiding the police, why did she then come into the police station and just make up a load of rubbish about UOP, thinking that would ever work? Absolutely crazy. But, I mean, the good news is that at least now you are getting the justice, you and Dan are getting the justice that you've deserved all this time. And finally, I hope at least, Betty's going to be behind bars for quite a while. I'm not quite sure what for, but for at least a few things, I hope. We're moving out. Hey lovelies, my ex and I have been talking a lot the last couple of days about things. We're both worried we haven't seen the end of his family shenanigans, so we decided it was best to move out of the house. We're going to be renting a storage locker so that we can store our things while we're staying with my parents for a while. We're now having to make so many phone calls and put a stop on any bill payments and contact a realtor company to put the house up for sale. I'm contacting a moving company to move our stuff to the storage facility after we pack it all up. We're hoping to get a decent payout on the house. We bought it from the old landlord a few years ago, and aside from a few minor damages, like a loose cabinet door or a stain on the carpet from when I spilled Chinese food on it, we've kept the house in good condition. It's a bit outdated, so we're not expecting anything over 400k, but it will put us in good standing with finding a new place in the future. I hate the idea of moving out of the home we've built together, but it's for the best, and it will make things a lot easier on us both. I don't plan on us staying with my parents forever. We'll eventually have to find somewhere else to move, but for now, they're happy to have us here. I've been allowing some discussion about our marriage and what we both want from it. He and I are still sleeping in separate rooms for the moment, but he's asking me to reconsider that and to work on getting back on track with our marriage. I'm back on birth control and I keep it locked up just in case. I now have a nightly reminder set to my smartwatch so I don't forget to take it. I'm still unsure, but I do admit I miss him and what we had so much. I love him and I can't imagine my life without him in it. I'm having another therapy appointment in a couple of days, so I'm going to discuss it with her and get her advice before making any decisions. I want to do this the right way and not push ourselves into anything that neither of us are ready for. He is still healing from his trauma, and I'm still healing from mine. Anyway, thankfully things are quiet. Still no word about Betty as she's still in jail. The investigation is ongoing, and the detective promises to call if there is any new information to share. Betty's latest BS. I just got a call from the detective and she wanted to let me know that Betty has gone on a hunger strike. That's right, she is on a hunger strike and she refuses to eat. This is not new behavior. She's done this a few times over the years where she'll get upset because Dan won't answer her calls or come running to her rescue, and she'll send videos or voicemails of herself claiming she's unable to eat because of how upset she is. My ex will have her favourite takeout delivered and she'll crack within an hour or two, devour the food, then call Dan to thank him. So what the detective told me didn't worry me at first. The detective said that it's already been 2 days and Betty hasn't eaten or drunk anything and just sits in her cell in a cold silence staring at the wall. I know this is just another grab for Dan's attention. She's hoping he will come running to her rescue. I asked the detective if that is why she called me and not him. She confirmed it and said she and her partner are making the decision to have Betty placed on a mandatory 72-hour psych hold, and if they have to force feed her, they will via a tube injected into her nose and down to her stomach, with her arms and legs strapped to a stretcher. She says that Betty will not avoid taking accountability for her crimes by starving herself to death. Nor will she guilt her victim into coming to her rescue if she has anything to say about it. Wow, that is a good detective right there. After I got off the phone with the detective, I spoke to my ex and I told him. Dan didn't even flinch. He said that she wasn't his problem anymore and she needs to get her trash together and accept that he is done with her. I had to pick my jaw up off the floor because I expected a wildly different reaction out of him. He said that his priority is healing and focusing on rebuilding our marriage. Remember that scene in The Grinch when he was being force-fed a bunch of pudding? That's how I envision Betty being force-fed. And instead of the lovable Jim Carrey, it's Betty in that green costume. I laughed at that mental image. Anyway, I'm heading into work. I'll see you lovelies next time I post an update. Okay, and there we go. Absolutely incredible. Also, I've got to say, it's very nice to see you guys who have been through this journey of a story with me on my channel in the comments on Reddit, actually giving some support to OP. Somebody said, "Hello OP, just finished reading your whole saga with Betty after hearing your first 3 posts from me." And oh my goodness, this is the first message ever that I've written on Reddit, but I wanted to let you know that I'm extremely happy that things are starting to work out for you and your ex, and there's loads more content there as well. I mean, that's the good thing about this, right? I can take stories from Reddit that are great, bring them to a whole new audience like you guys watching and listening right now that otherwise may not have found them. And then if you like, you can go onto Reddit and give some support as well, or not, up to you. But yeah, it's pretty cool. The one thing I've got to say about this story though is I just don't think it's finished. Like 6 days ago, we got this post right at the time of recording, but like there's got to be more, right? There has to be more. So I can't really say right now that this is the end, even though right now it's sort of the end. I think there's got to be more. I will look out for stories, any upcoming posts on this, because look, we need more updates. We've had 10 episodes. There has to be an 11th. But yeah, finally, this woman is in jail. She's doing a hunger strike though. She doesn't learn, does she? Even like when, I would have think, you look in the mirror when you're sat in your cell and you think, okay, look, I'll probably stop with all the games now and just, yeah, try and turn my life around, do my sentence and be normal. No, just hunger strike. Look, to be fair, she probably does have some serious mental issues, because I don't think anyone that is sane would do this sort of stuff in the first place, let alone do a hunger strike in prison. Maybe she's still attention seeking. I don't know. I think she does have serious issues. But yeah, seeing how Dan finally has, I don't want to say grown up because that's wrong, but you know what I mean, leveled up, let's just say that, and finally has said, you know what, I don't have anything to do with her anymore. She's not my business. I'm going to live my life and I want to focus on you, OP, and hopefully reconnecting and getting our marriage back on track. That is elite. I've been hoping for that the whole story pretty much. So that is amazing to see. And yeah, I wish you guys the best of luck in future. But until now, guys, that is going to be the end of the saga. But don't worry, I'll look out for any more updates and I'll be there if there are any more. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this series, and also let me know in the comments down below, do you want to see more sort of series of stories like this again, where this sort of story just takes over the channel for what, 10 days, 2 weeks, and we don't really touch on any other subreddits in that period of time, but everyone sort of just locks in to one story and you see how it progresses day on day? Let me know what you think about that. I've enjoyed it, so I would definitely do it again if the right story came up. Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But thank you for the support on this series. It's been very, very cool to see. And I'll catch you tomorrow with some brand new Reddit stories.